Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 153. My name is NBZ, and we were just talking about this, but I think it's been like over a month since we sat down at computers and recorded an episode together, Bally, so feeling a little bit foreign in this moment.
And then between, obviously, we were getting sunburned around the centre of DC,
yes,
recording the last episode, which also felt like quite a long time ago.
Yeah, no, it has been a little bit of a while, and we're both back from America now. We're back as usual, and so we're here.
Back in the wet and cold of the UK.
You know what? I do miss it, Bally. I have to say, there is something about the humidity when I was in America. I was like, I can't fucking stand this. Like, there is a density to the heat in the atmosphere that doesn't vibe with me. You know, like I can take it when it gets a little bit hot, but when it's humid, that's when I just want to die.
You prefer a dry heat?
Yeah, I do. I for sure do.
East Coast is very humid and like
it is
not dry. But
yeah, it's not too pleasant. But hey, we did some fun things, saw some fun places, and we'll talk about some of that as well. And yeah, we're back here. As I said, I'm MBZ. I didn't really introduce you, Bally, but you're here as well. You're my co-host.
I just come in now. That's what I do. I'm just here.
Yeah, you just exist, and it's just assumed by the listener. But this could be someone's first episode, so hello, welcome. This is your first episode.
Hello.
We like to talk about Nintendo video games, other video games, the news, all that sort of stuff here. It's a good fun time. And yeah, so what we're going to talk about today, Bally, let them all know.
For our first segment, we're going to be talking about the games that we have been playing. Our second segment is going to be your emails. And our third segment, we're going to do a little retroactive, talking about the history that Nintendo have had with mobile games, because it's been mixed. It's been going a long time now, and Mario Kart Tour has just come out that I think you've tried a bit of, MBZ, and have a few thoughts.
I have opinions, so we'll talk about that and how their evolving strategy has happened, and kind of talking about what they could do next potentially and stuff like that. I think taking stock of it now at this point with Mario Kart Tour coming out and being a one of their bigger franchises to debut on the system is interesting. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that, but let's kick things off with video games. Bally.
Yes.
We obviously, when we're on holiday, like, I want to play loads of video games, and it turns out actually you don't have time to play lots of video games because there's things that happen. But we'd squeeze in some stuff while we're over there still in America.
Yeah, it was a really busy holiday for me, really. It was just either you're up and you're out, you're doing things, or you're back, and, I do enjoy a nap every now and then. So, like, doing things in the evenings, meeting people, seeing people, it was busy. So I did try and just kind of get through a few things, but they were kind of like little short sessions, drips and drabs here and there. So like I finished up Mario Maker 2's story mode,
which is quite good actually, I think, for drips and drabs. Like, as a game that you can pick up and just make a little dent in.
It's very easy to dip in, dip out. You can play it with a podcast on. That's always a great factor for playing a game when you're on holiday, because obviously podcasts are always building up. And it really got my creative juices going. But have you dived in back to the creator yet? Well, that's the thing. As I was saying, like, I just don't have the time to do it. So I've got all these ideas, but like, there's so many games coming out right now, and I as much as I'd like to make another Mario Maker 2 level, it's hard to just factor it in. So I do think the story mode is just a really great mode that feels very un-Nintendo, and I said this in the last episode, but it just feels very like Nintendo stepping outside their comfort zone and really iterating on what was built in like Mario Maker 1 in terms of like some of the fun levels people were making, and they came up with their own ideas in line with those, which feels very unique for them. And like, it's a really great way for just people who sometimes struggle to get their creative juices going, which I certainly do occasionally, and like, I've now got a bunch of ideas I'd like to try that iterate on lots of those ideas that I just want to give a go. And I think that mode is just a real feather in the cap, really, I'd argue, of Mario Maker 2, and just kind of an aspect of that game that, in hindsight, was maybe lacking from the first game, and I think it's a really nice addition.
Yeah, it is good, right? And it does do a lot of that stuff, but again, it's not a game, right? Like, when I say that, obviously it's a video game, but like, it's not a Mario game. You're not getting, the story mode is not a level by level build on mechanics to find stuff, but, which for me, as I've mentioned before, is actually, it's more what I prefer, which is a lot of
exactly, that's what I was going to say,
ideas.
If you gave me Mario Maker 2 story mode, or like, I don't know, New Super Mario Brothers X, Y, whatever you call it, like to infinity. I'd rather play this than any new Super Mario Brothers game, just because those levels are more interesting. They are very different.
Sure.
And
but it is weird though, right? Because you do get an assault of ideas, and so it is hard sometimes to be like, oh, well, which one of these ideas do I do? Can I even remember at this point? I played Mario Maker Story Mode a couple of months ago, so I can't even really remember what ideas are the ones I want to focus on and stuff like that. So it maybe requires you to go back, and then finding the right level that had the right mechanic in it is maybe a little bit tricky, but that's maybe just a very specific problem, which isn't indicative of the quality of it, because I do think the quality is there.
I mean, if they listed those levels by mechanics, that'd be kind of cool.
It'd be helpful to be like, hey, this includes, this is focused around this idea. That would be neat for sure. But how do you feel about just Mario Maker and Nintendo's treatment of it as of recent?
It's been forgotten about, hasn't it?
It's just been left by the wayside, right? And I think you look back at the Wii U and how Mario Maker was treated, and you got the amiibo support, you got the patch with all the keys being added and all that stuff, and new items, the donuts, and loads of different things. That game really felt like Nintendo were behind it, and they were really pushing it as a game that they would update over time and really give care and attention to. And I think now, because of the Switch, especially with this really packed back half of the year, they're like, oh, don't got time to breathe, man. We've got Fire Emblem, followed by Astral Chain, followed by Link's Awakening, followed by Luigi's Mansion, followed by Pokemon. Like, it's just like non-stop. So it's like basically on to the next thing, and it feels like they have abandoned it somewhat. Not to mention other random things coming out of nowhere, like Ring Fit Adventure. It really feels like Nintendo were like, oh, yeah, people were mad about that Friends thing. We'll get to it. And like it feels now they are just like, hey, people will have forgotten about this. Let's not bother with it. Which sucks.
Yeah, I definitely think because their lineup is so dense that they are not getting a free pass, but they are getting away with it a lot more than they would have had other games not been coming out.
Well, they're getting away with it because I don't have time to play Mario Maker. I'm just playing other stuff.
But considering they were so big on the multiplayer focus at E3 and, the whole, like, what did Nintendo World Championship they did.
Yes,
There's a huge emphasis on, like, these co-op levels that you could design and play with your friends.
Right, and I was really excited to be like, oh, yeah, Bally, let's find some really good co-op levels and go through them together and stuff like that. And never happened, not only because they didn't have Friends multiplayer, but also I think that if we did, it would be a garbage experience, because the online in that game is maybe among the worst things I've seen Nintendo try in their existence. Like, it is it's a screen, it's a fucking PowerPoint presentation, it's a slideshow, and that sucks, and I haven't seen any evidence for it getting better. Obviously I haven't jumped in and played it, so I wouldn't know, but I don't really have the motivation to do so in any real way. And I think the other thing is, as it feels like people who play video games have kind of moved on from Mario Maker, it feels like there's less investment from me to go ahead, spend 9 hours making a level only for 5 people to play it, because there's not many people still playing Mario Maker at this point in the year. That is a knock-on effect. Now also, because there are less people streaming it on Twitch, it means that my avenue to get my level played by someone and see it being played, because the majority of people are going to be the big people still streaming it, like speedrunners and stuff like that. So it feels like the community aspect of Mario Maker is pretty much half the game for me, and like half the reason I like it. And so the fact that as a entity has diminished because of Nintendo's just ignoring it, and also it coming in a very busy time in 2019 when video games are just popping off, it has lessened my desire to go back to it, which is a shame. And in some senses, just makes it so that our decision to put Mario Maker 1 in our top 50 games and not Mario Maker 2 vindicated to some degree. But
no, exactly. But I mean, it's great overall. That mode is fun, and hopefully it will have like some revitalization.
Yeah, it needs that injection, man. It needs the Nintendo Direct to be like, hey, here's a patch coming. We're adding this, and this. You can now play with your friends. We're doing this. We're adding in a website like we had before. Like stuff like that.
Even if they did that in like spring 2020 when everything's died down a bit and there's a bit of space and people can appreciate that again, then
you say spring 2020, but like fucking February, March, April next year is just savage. It's just horrible. Not horrible. Like, it's amazing. There are so many good games coming out, but it's like, Jesus, how does anyone play any of these? Great. Okay, cool. Mario Maker, but closed on the story mode at least, which is nice for you to be done with that.
Nice. I've also been playing Celeste. So obviously Chapter 9 came out.
He's a brutal boy. He's a brutal. I'll tell you what.
And I was like, I've not actually played through. I think I played the first B-side before, like when I was playing the main game of Celeste, and I was like, I need to go back and play those B-sides. So it took me. I've only played like an extra 3 or 4 hours, but in that time, I only did like the first 3 B-sides. And I think it's gonna be like if I've got a big podcast backlog, I'm just gonna get in there with Celeste B-sides, because it is so good to just keep going, like back and forth, just keep going, and the satisfaction of beating those levels. And for me, I think it is. Now I've not gotten to the C-sides, and like I was struggling a lot with the third B-side where you're like in that chap's hotel, Mr. Oshiro, I think.
Right, yes, that's tricky stuff in there, for sure.
Yeah, and I was reading a lot of YouTube comments suggesting that was the hardest of the bunch, but I mean,
yeah, I remember it being tricky. I think my vision on what is hard is skewed because I spent like 12 hours on one screen on a seaside. So, like that screen is the hardest, maybe the hardest thing I've done in video games. Like, it's ridiculous.
I mean, there's nothing else you'll have spent 12 hours on doing a specific thing in any video game by a long shot. So.
It's a thing that takes you 30 seconds to do. It takes you, if you do it correct, it will take you 30 seconds. And I spent probably 10 hours. Like, 12 is probably an exaggeration, but like...
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've got loads of B-sides and C-sides to get through, and I just think it's the perfect podcasting game. I'm just gonna keep working through it, and I kind of want to try more platformers as a result. I know there's not a ton of them, and I know we've got like Super Meat Boy Forever coming soon.
Shout out real quick, if the eShop sale is still on, there's a big eShop sale happening right now. Loads of stuff is on discount. Ink is on sale for like £2.
You have talked about Ink a lot of times, and I need to pick that up. It should be very cheap when it's on sale as well. So
yeah, it's like £2.50 I think at the moment, so just go grab that.
Is that a short game?
Oh yeah, like an hour.
An hour? Yeah, I mean, I might just beat that and play it for next time because I've got so many other things to play and need stuff to talk about on here. So that'd be a good one to just give a go.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, just Celeste. It's just a godlike game. I'm glad we ended up on our list. It is so great, and I will get to Chapter 9 one day, I'm sure. But I mean, what have you thought of Chapter 9 so far?
So, Chapter 9 feels like you have to be a speedrunner or have the mindset of a speedrunner to get through it. It's kind of broken into 2 halves, I believe. I've just finished the first kind of section of it, and it. We talk about Celeste often as it's a puzzle game and a platformer. It's primarily a puzzle game first because you have to figure out what the fuck you need to do to get through a level. And I think that is reflected much more in the B-sides. Like, now you've started doing that, I feel like you'll probably see a lot more of how the hell do I get over there? Like, what does the game want me to do? And that is very much what Chapter 9 is. It's like, it introduces some new mechanics, and one of the major ones is these squids. They're kind of like floating tentacly squid guys. And they're really tricky to get the hang of because what you can do is you can let go of them and they will kind of float off in a direction in front of you. But if you dash into them and kind of grab them while you dash into them, you get momentum so that they float up. So they're kind of like an umbrella almost to some degree. They kind of look like an umbrella when you're holding them, or like a parachute almost. And so a lot of Chapter 9 is using those to get through challenges that require timing of you like throwing it over here so that it hits a spring, and then you jump back into it to get up, and you throw it back over the other side so that it hits another spring and bounces over. It feels like a Rube Goldberg machine in terms of automation to some degree, but you're the one pulling the strings the whole time and making sure it goes off without a hitch. Is the kind of the best way I can describe it. And so many of those screens I was like, I really have no idea what to do. And it a lot of times spent, 20 minutes going in the wrong direction, right? Just like going down a path that wasn't where I was supposed to be going, and then eventually realizing like, actually this is what I need to do instead. There's only been a couple of times where I've had to look up what I actually had to do. So generally it's followed a trend of me being fine, knowing how to get past a thing. The other obstacle, of course, is actually doing it yourself, like making sure you're good enough to get past it, which has been tricky, but I think I've managed to get there. At this point, though, I feel like I might be beyond hope, because they've just introduced a mechanic where if you dash into the ground and then at the last minute press the jump button, you'll do a large jump but keep your dash. So you dash, but then you keep your dash. And
because you're still making contact with the ground, I'm assuming. So
not really, because you're supposed to jump like right before you hit the ground. Okay. So it really feels like they've taken a technique that was, I think, already in the game, which players had referred to as wave dashing, and have now actually added it to the game so that you can actually see her hair change back. Because I think before, what had been the case was you could do it, but it didn't look like you got the hair charged back up, even though you did have it. I had a quick look at one of the videos, like of someone explaining it, but they literally call it wave dashing. And that was where I was like, well, maybe I'm fucked here, because like they're starting to use melee competitive terms, and they then kind of combine it with this other mechanic from very late game in the seasides, where if you dash on a vertical edge and then like jump as you hit the vertical edge, it does like a huge addition of momentum to you, so you can get much higher than you usually would get. And so there's this one part which is just the tutorial of teaching you how to do it, where you have to dash, jump, keep your momentum, dash, jump, and then dash, jump up and do the vertical one as well. And I just can't do it. I spent 25 minutes and if I can't pull off this tutorial of how to do this, I don't know that I can do this.
So they do actually have like a tutorial how to do it.
Yeah, they really take you through your paces, but it is really challenging and it's so tricky to get it right. And I feel like I should push through, because friend of the show Toby, I've been seeing him post videos on Twitter if he's going through it, and he posted a video that showed a lot of those things strung together, and it looked really fucking hard. And I'm like, well, he can do it though, so maybe I can do it. So I am kind of thinking, this isn't going to be a game, Chapter 9, that I will finish anytime soon, I think. I think I'm going to come back to it in bits and starts, which might be a bad idea, because it seems like it requires a lot of focus and practice and taking those skills and making sure they don't atrophy. But it is, I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, well, I'm probably going to go at a pace of like 40 minutes a screen, so...
Knowing that you've done 12 hours on one single screen on a seaside, and you've come to this Chapter 9 and be like, I think I've reached my limit. I think that says a lot about like where this Chapter 9 is at.
No, I think it's more that I know my own personal skill and dexterity, and I look at this stuff and I think, I don't know. I don't know if I want to commit myself to being a melee pro Smash player. That's the kind of feeling it is to some degree. Which, like, I could probably learn to wave dash in Smash Brothers Melee. Do I want to spend like 100 hours practicing? Not really. And that this is different, of course, because it's a single player game. Like, there are design challenges for you, but there is a sense that I'm like, Maybe I'll hang up the hat here. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll just turn on assist mode and just go through it and see what the levels are, It could be as easy as that. But
that's an idea, yeah. And it's nice that mode is there if you just
totally try it. If I want to see the ending and some of the dialogue and stuff like that, it's there for you. So.
I saw a report saying that the designers of Celeste weren't planning on making a sequel, and I sort of tweeted this at the time saying, I've not done any of the B-sides or C-sides. Like, I really don't personally need a sequel to Celeste in that sense. I think if they did something else with the story, that's another matter, perhaps. But like,
totally.
I do sense that the story in itself is a very complete, finite thing, and I'm not kind of someone who would want another Celeste. If they took a similar concept and did something different, that's a different thing entirely. But I kind of it's a very complete package as it is, between B-sides, C-sides, and now this Chapter 9. I feel like it's very much done in that sense.
Yeah, totally. I agree, and I the first game that Matt Thorson made was Towerfall, and it's a multiplayer action arena game, which is totally different to Celeste. So I'm sure that whatever they've changed the name of the studio now. I can't remember what it's called, but now that it's not just him mainly doing it, they've got a bunch of other people in there, so they changed the name of the studio. Whatever they do next, I'm there for. I'm interested in what it is, but I do hope it is something completely different again, because as we talked about, we did a Patreon episode on like our favorite developers, and I talked about Drinkbox Studios and how I respect Drinkbox so much because every time they tackle a game, usually they just go at a completely new thing. And I like that. So hopefully that's the case. Cool.
So I've also been playing, and you talked about this a bit last time, Creature in the Well, which we both had review codes for.
We did, yes, thanks to Pop Agenda.
So this is it's a cool concept. It's the sort of dungeon crawling, and each room you're essentially rebounding these pinball balls off bumpers to build up electricity, and the electricity you build up essentially unlocks doors that you then progress.
It's like a currency you need to get further into, deeper into the dungeon.
Yeah, and I love the style. I love the art style. It has a real Droids on Tatooine feel about it for me.
Yeah,
like it's very Star Wars, I think. And I like the first couple of hours, I think, were great. Like it's nothing you hit can essentially hurt you. I feel in the first couple of hours, you're just pinging these balls about.
Yeah, they definitely introduce the red balls, right? Which are there will be turrets which shoot pinballs at you, which is one of the methods that they keep a lot of balls available to you, because you could imagine in this scenario, if you're hitting balls up and down, you need to have a good supply of balls constantly coming at you. So one way they do it is there are panels on the ground which just respawn balls constantly, but the other way is having cannons that shoot them at you, and the cannons initially start as enemies, which means that you have to use you basically have two weapons. One weapon is a kind of a pause slow down weapon that keeps the ball hovering within your vicinity.
You can essentially grab a ball, hold it, and then ping it back, and you can move a bit with it as well.
Yes, exactly. So the idea is to, like, when these red ones are coming at you, you need to use the grab tool to grab it towards you, and then you can hit it back. You can't just hit it back on its own, otherwise you'll die. Or hit you, whatever, it'll do damage.
Yeah. So I was like pretty happy with the game going along.
Yeah.
Like these droids appear and they shoot at you, and then you're like, right, you grab it and then shoot back, and then eventually you get to the point where the mechanics don't change a ton, and then all of a sudden they throw in these essentially just bombs, more or less, that bomb turrets.
They're kind of like they are essentially cylinders that, if they get hit, quickly pulse out a warning shot, and then they'll pulse out a really large radius, like circle radius around them, of damage.
Yeah.
And
it does a lot of damage.
It does a lot of damage, and I think the ultimate problem with this game is you don't have the tools to quickly escape from that damage. Like, the radius is large enough that your dash ability, even if you are if you're close to it when it hits, you don't have the time to dash away because your dash is not far enough for the radius of the circle that it encompasses.
Yeah, and it's a single dash, and then it's dash pause. Like, it doesn't, you can't dash like very quickly. So I was also finding, like, I was upgrading my suit, armor, whatever you call it, and I found that it was hardly giving me any extra health, and I must have upgraded it like 3, 4, 5 times, and then I think we were both stuck on this boss that's essentially like, and you can play the bosses out of order, like it could be the 4th or the 6th or 7th boss, I think. And these bombs that you were just talking about, Emmy said, they were just
it's a very small platform.
Yeah, really
there are
small.
2 of them on this platform. There is no safe area. There's literally no safe area.
Yeah. So you are relying on balls flying around the stage, damaging the parts of the stage you're meant to, like, attack without them hitting these columns. And at times, yes, absolutely, there's skill involved, but a lot of the time it just feels like a lot of luck.
Yes,
and then obviously, like, it's pinging off and hitting them and then doing damage to you, and it's just, when you die from random balls pinging around the stage and then hitting, like, it's just it's very frustrating, because it feels like all of a sudden the power has been taken out of your hands, and you've died almost not through no fault of your own, but like through means by which you had very little control over it. And that's a very frustrating feeling in video games.
Yeah, and I think the ultimate problem is that it goes up this sharp cliff in difficulty with hardly any warning, really,
because those columns just appear all of a sudden, and you see them a little bit here and there, and then all of a sudden they're a main feature of this boss, and they're taking up the entire platform, as you said, and it's just really tough to avoid.
I think for me, as a game, as mechanics, like I really like it. I think it feels good, you know. I think it has a great sense of style to it. It does the bold kind of cell shading, like really extreme cell shading, specific colors that are, you know, there's not much texture, right? There's not much texture to it, and that stuff is great. Like it looks good, it feels good, it's fun, but there is a sense of diminishing returns when it comes to the level design and the rooms you go into. There's a sense of ploddingness, a sense of you're doing the same thing again. It doesn't feel like, because what they tend to do is keep the same types of rooms, like add a few things, like make it a bit more challenging, but it's ultimately the same with a different color palette. Like they just change the color palette for each dungeon you go through, but it feels so similar. And it does feel like an idea that should have been maybe 2 to 3 hours long instead of 5 to 6.
Yeah, I was going to say, just the number of ideas there, they could have just made it more compact and maybe just eased that difficulty curve, which for me personally, I think you found as well, was just too steep, too radical. And, you know, this is like a 5-6 hour game, I understand.
Yeah.
And like, that's quite a lot for this one concept that doesn't evolve a ton. And as you say, like there are a lot of concepts that are repeated again and again and again just to build up this charge to open those doors. And, you know, like the boss concepts change a bit, but like the fundamental like design like doesn't change. You're essentially on this lift platform and it goes up and up and up, and then you're facing round after round of enemies. And I don't know, there's something about it that feels quite rote, and then you just want, like we said, just either make it more compact and use those ideas and make the difficulty a bit better, or kind of you need a lot more thought gone into like innovating on that concept.
Yeah, and it's a shame because it's one of those ideas that you start playing and you're like, oh, this is fresh, like this feels really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And then it stagnates almost instantly, and it is a shame, because I think that had there been more time taken to consider, like, instead of just adding more enemies and difficulty and stuff like that, and maybe thinking about how you could diversify the mechanics, make things a little bit more different, diversify the areas, just like some of the challenges. I think variety in gameplay is my real problem with this game, and it falls down just because it is so repetitive, ultimately.
I think if there'd been more of a focus on slowing everything down and focusing on far fewer balls, I might have warmed to it more. Because while it's cool seeing all these balls ping all over the place, as I said, like the second you throw in these columns that damage you when the balls come back and hit those columns and then damage you, it just feels very out of your control. So had it been like slower, more specific, but then again, that's kind of almost a very different game that I'm now describing, and maybe that would have detracted from that initial feeling of, hey, this is cool, we're throwing balls all over the place and we're building electricity and unlocking doors and progressing. And as you say, that feeling hits a wall quite quickly when you realize that there's not much more there.
Right. Ultimately, it comes down to pinball games this year that I've played. I played Yoku and then I played this, and neither of them really did it for me. Like, I feel like maybe I just want to play pinball and not these other games that have pinball elements to them. Like it sounded like such a cool idea for both of them, and it pans out that actually maybe pinball's just better as pinball. So yeah, it's a shame.
Another game I've been playing, and we've both been playing. You've beaten. I'm just been so busy recently. I should say, like, I'm moving into a new flat. That Caroline and myself have bought. So like we've been crazy busy. But that's obviously Link's Awakening. I'm only 2 dungeons in, and it's really hitting me. Just old-fashioned 2D Zelda design. You know, like it's hitting me hard in the sense that a game. So the 2 of the best 2D Zeldas in my view are like Minish Cap and Link Between Worlds, where I think as much as Minish Cap has a few aspects that are very like, oh my god, where do I go next? What do I do?
Definitely within that, the scope of the classic Zelda.
Sure, yeah, I would agree, but I think the actual dungeon design of a game like Minish Cap is really impressive and like really kind of like thematically, mechanically, like awesome.
As we talked about when we did our Backlog Club on Minish Cap, the dungeons in that game feel far more akin to something you'd find in Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword than they feel...
Absolutely, and they take about that length of time as well.
Right, as opposed to Link's Awakening or the Oracle games, right? It is still it's a flagship Capcom game, but it feels like they took hints from Wind Waker rather than hints from the Oracle games when designing the dungeons of Minish Cap.
Yeah, and like, so back to Link's Awakening, it is hard to know what to do next, and not necessarily in the first few dungeons. Inside the first few dungeons, they're easy enough, they're fine. I'm talking about like, between them, linking up towns.
Or even like right at the start, where it's like, I'm a raccoon, and you're like, find a mushroom in the forest, and you have to go to the witch to get the potion.
I only played Link's Awakening like near the start of this podcast, so around 2014, 2015. I was actually on a trip to the United States at the time, and I distinctly remember sinking about 18, 20 hours into that game, and I tried to use a guide as sparingly as possible, partly because I was on a flight and you can't have internet access, and tried to look up, and I was actually working out, I got far, like I did 3, 4, 5 dungeons almost back to back without a guide, and it took me a really long time because I would... systematically work out who to talk to, where do I have to go. And it was very satisfying. But I think perhaps for me, my tastes have maybe evolved and changed a bit, where Link's Awakening, the actual original, has gone down in my estimations compared to other 2D Zeldas, especially when games like Link Between Worlds have come out since. And I actually, between then and now, played Minish Cap as well, which I actually think is a very good 2D Zelda, as I mentioned just before. And I think that combination, just going back to this game and realizing, actually... if you don't want to use a guide to get from A to B, I actually struggle quite a lot. And like maybe like I said, my tastes, I'm just keen on being a bit more streamlined through a game, and my threshold for holding off and not using a guide is maybe lower than it used to be. But I'm just keen to like, maybe because I've got a lot of games to play on my plate right now. I want to get this done. I want to move on. But like, I definitely am finding like it's hard, like, to work out where to go. Like, as you said, the raccoon. Why is this raccoon screwing me up,
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I played Link's Awakening a bit more recently than you did. Even though in the scope of the podcast, it's maybe 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
I found going through this a lot easier, not only because of a lot of the improvements they've made, but because I, for whatever reason, remembered, like, lots of little random things about the game. And it's definitely an interesting case, right? Because this is a full remake visually, but in so many senses, it's just the same game. And so many of the problems of the game remain, but there have been ways in which they have made them a bit more accessible, things a bit easier. So let's maybe talk top level first of all about the performance, because I think that's a thing that a lot of people have discussed about the frame rate and stuff like that and the visual fidelity. How do you feel about it? Is it bothering you at all? What kind of, how do you feel about what Link's Awakening looks like, how it runs?
Yeah, so I mean, the world is absolutely gorgeous. I think that's pretty undeniable. The art style they've gone for, the lighting, the bloom, it just sings. I love it. I think it's a far less impressive game, and we discussed this a bit over Twitter, but for me, in the first 2 dungeons so far, and I think you said it does improve, the dungeons just feel thematically very dull, like the original. Like the as much as the overworld looks really fascinating and interesting and sings, like the dungeons, and they just feel thematically very flat in comparison.
Yeah, a lot of the dungeons, you couldn't really do much with them because the original doesn't have theming that is that standoutish, right? So
maybe
definitely
just adding a thick layer of theming suddenly onto those dungeons would have been weird, but I don't know, maybe they could have done
they do what they can, and
yeah.
especially with, say, the fourth dungeon, which is a water dungeon, it's far more obvious there, and it's easier to do that, like making it much more blue and giving it like...
And the water does look glorious so far.
Yeah, it looks great.
I've not seen water in the dungeon yet, like the fourth one you said, but like so far it looks incredible, and like...
Yeah, for sure.
The hanging up, so like the glitching, the whatever you call it.
So shall I explain what's happening?
Go for it.
I've watched a bunch of stuff on it, and so don't know all the technical stuff of what's going on, but I know when the frame rate stuff happens and to some degree why it happens. So essentially what happens is when you are moving from environments, from a new environment that has to be loaded in, the game should run at 60 most of the time, and it does, which is great, and it looks fantastic when it does. But the real jarring thing is it goes from 60 right down to 30, and it kind of doesn't have any in between. One of my big problems with some PC games that I play and things that really annoy me is when frame rate is constantly fluctuating, when it's like going up and down all the time constantly. That is literally the worst. Like, I would rather play a game at 30 frames per second that is solid than a game on my PC that jumps between 45 to 52 to 43 to 50 to 60. That is a nightmarish experience, and it is like motion sickness inducing in some cases. When frame rates just fluctuate like nonsense, that is a nightmare.
It's interesting you say that, because I believe it was Jeff Gersman on Giant Bombcast basically saying, you know what, when it jumps like that, he's like, I just rather the screen tore and then kept the frame rate constant. So he's basically saying...
Yeah, I don't agree with Jeff necessarily. I think screen tearing is rough.
So it's quite a radical thing, and obviously Nintendo would never do that, like the idea of the screen tearing in order to preserve the frame rate of the rest of the screen. And maybe
I've tried to play games with screen tearing, and I think it is garbage. I cannot play stuff with screen tearing. It's awful. But the weird thing here is it doesn't necessarily have that same feel, because it is literally jumping from 60 to 30, and you can stand there and look at it happen. It is so funny to me for people who can't tell the difference between 30 and 60. They have been playing this game and they're like, yeah, it's I don't know, I don't notice it. And I'm like, if you can't notice this, you're a lost cause, because this is the most stark example of literally showing you the direct difference between what 30 frames per second looks like and what 60 frames per second looks like. And it makes a bad first impression, because it is worse in Mabe Village, because you're constantly going in and out of interiors. And when you do that, the game has to load up new textures, load up a new environment, and thus the frame rate when you pop straight out into it is going to be halved. This happens to a minor degree, like when you get new items and stuff like that, but basically what it's doing is it's trying to load in new textures, but as it tries to do that, the frame rate can't keep up with the new texture loading in, and so it really buckles for a bit. But once that environment has been loaded and you go back and forth and you go back to that space, then it's fine. There's one area in the game which is really bad. It's the swamp area, where all the thorny bushes are, and you have to get Bow Wow to go and eat all the bushes to get through. That's the worst part of the game frame rate-wise. Otherwise, inside dungeons, it tends to stick pretty solidly to 60 and stays pretty fluid throughout. But it is a real disappointment. And, Nintendo, as a company, I always have faith that they prioritize frame rate. They go above and beyond for it. You look at things, first party titles like Mario Odyssey and Splatoon 2, gorgeous, never drop, always perfect. And even on the 3DS, Link Between Worlds, one of the most fluid experiences I've ever played in my life. And yet we are now in this era where it's like, well, Breath of the Wild has frame rate problems, and a lot of ports on Switch have frame rate problems. And it seems like even Nintendo and their internal teams, Grezzo is not an internal team, but like this game will have been overseen by Nintendo's R&D people.
Definitely.
It's really a shame, and it really shows a drop in standards for them to be okay to release a game like this that has this level of performance issues. Now, what I'll say is you can deal with it. Like, you get used to it. It doesn't make the game that much worse. It's a frustration in a game where it should be perfect and flawless, and it's gorgeous, and it is such a bold art style, but Mario Odyssey is a big 3D open environment world game, and that
doesn't drop
fine.
a second in that entire experience. Exactly. It's a shame. It's shocking. I mean, for me personally, it doesn't bother me a ton, and I know there's a lot of people like me, but from stepping back, like knowing that Nintendo okayed this, that's more concerning to me than the actual thing itself. And like, I know some people have said early on in the game it really didn't bother them, but then as it was happening during some fights later on, it bothered them more. So I'm still at this phase where it's I've never had to be doing anything on screen when it's happened. It's just like going between screens.
Right.
It was interesting you pronounced it I would say Mabe Village. You could
Mabe, yeah.
I don't know how others are pronouncing it.
Maybe Village.
Maybe Village. So yeah, when I'm going between Mabe Village and back and forth, whatever, then I'll notice it. But like, yeah, it's not bothering me, but it is concerning, and it is weird where you'd almost give it a game like Breath of the Wild a little bit more of a free pass. Not that it gets a free pass.
Oh, I give it a much more of a free pass.
Exactly.
Because it's the biggest game Nintendo's ever made.
Exactly. And now we're talking about like a 2D remake. As nice as nicer looking as it is, it's like, come on. Like,
fundamentally, it's a top-down 2D Zelda.
Yeah.
Like,
are you surprised it didn't just go for 30 frames per second and keep it smooth? Why were they so keen to stick to 60, knowing potentially that this was going to drop at times, you know?
Because I think it's been a hallmark of 2D Zelda, right? Like, I think every 2D Zelda has run at 60 frames per second, as far as I know. Obviously, the Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass didn't, but those are not quite the same. They're isometric, like they are a little bit different. But every other one, I believe, has, and like, especially because this is, in some senses, a sequel to A Link Between Worlds, as far as like A Link's Awakening is a sequel to Link to the Past. It's the most recent 2D Zelda they've released. Yeah. So that game was 60. So like, why should this one not be? And I think that's what they strove for. That's what they wanted to do. And to be fair, let's say 70% of the game, maybe 80% of the game does run at 60 frames per second, and it is gorgeous and it is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially, like, you really get a sense of the toy-like nature of the game with the way Link moves. Initially, I was like, why have they made him only move in in 8 directions? Like, it seems really weird, because in Link Between Worlds, they certainly didn't do that. You have complete free movement in that game, versus this one where it is locked into a specific movement pattern.
It's a lot closer to the grid, I guess, that they're basing it off. I don't know.
Right. And I think that actually, when you spin Link around, he looks like a toy. Like, there's almost a claymation animation style to it. Like, I kept spinning him around on the screen, and the way that he, like, kind of almost jerkily moves around has that stop motion feel to it, which adds to that sense of this is a diorama, this is kind of a toy box world.
It's very distinct from a game like Link Between Worlds, where they could have totally just gone for that art style and repeated the same thing they were going for there, but they've decided no, like, we have to innovate further, and like it is kind of awesome what they've done here, like, as you say, that toy like style.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, there's so many little things I think that this game does well. One of the first videos I posted to Twitter was me just bonking one of those little shell guys, and oh my god, the sound design in this game, top fucking tier. This is like Metroid Fusion level of sound design.
It's good.
Like, bopping those little guys when you get the Pegasus boots, like the little tapping of his feet is so good. It's so good. Like, little stuff like that is the kind of polish for me in games that enhances the experience. And so that was really impactful. Like, what I did with this game was I really committed myself to it. I was playing on screen right in front of me, headphones in, just fully absorbing it. And again, the soundtrack's fantastic. They've taken a lot of really good songs in Link's Awakening. I know you're a big fan of Telltale Heights.
Absolutely.
So the music is great, and they've orchestrated it. It just sounds bombastic and brilliant, and yeah, you know, because, you know, the Game Boy hardware, the sound chip and that stuff wasn't fantastic, so it definitely has improved. And there's another little improvement that I don't know, someone on Twitter said that it actually was in the original game, but bombs, what you do is, if you drop one on the ground, you pick it back up, it unlights itself, so you can put bombs down, they'll be almost dead and like gonna explode, and you can pick them back up again, and they don't keep going, they'll just reset their timer essentially, which in a game like Link's Awakening, which relies a lot on bosses which you need bombs for, like, remember I don't know if you come across them yet, but the big, like, round black, like, monsters that have, like, they look like 2 cannonballs stuck together essentially with a giant mouth, and you have to put the bomb inside them for them to explode their giant belly.
Not yet.
That boss is really fucking annoying on the original Link's Awakening, and it's still kind of annoying here, but I think it is mitigated by the idea that if you drop a bomb on the ground, you can pick it back up and it will reset the timer of it, which for me is like, it's the most innovation they've had in bombs since goddamn Link's Awakening's Mana Bar. Like, it was really, really cool.
Link Between Worlds.
Oh, sorry, Link Between Worlds, yes. But apparently, someone, I think it was Universal Giant, who said to me that that was the way they did it in the original, because you're only allowed to have one bomb on screen at a time. And it's similar here; you can only have one bomb on screen at a time. But the fact that you have that leeway with it, because there are Zelda games wherein you'll put a bomb on the ground, and you'll be like, oh fuck, I don't want it there, and you'll try to move it, but it'll explode in your hand as you try to move it. It's a pain. So I'm glad that that's been the case. Have you found the dungeon so far? What have you been finding with them?
They're great. I think that they're very short. They're very simple so far. But I know that you've tried a bit of. I was going to say Link Between Worlds. I want to say Link to the Past. That's the game I want to say. I know you've tried a bit of Link to the Past, and based on my previous playing of Link's Awakening and Link to the Past, I do actually think Link's Awakening is a step up in like dungeon design in terms of like puzzles and what you're doing. And
yeah, I don't know.
Maybe not a big step up, but
I would say they are similar. I would say I to some degree prefer Link to the Past, just because it is so distinctive in its environmental design and its dungeon design
I'll give it that, definitely. Yeah,
from an aesthetic purpose, but also from a structural point of view, because there are, like, the first dungeon in Link to the Past where you are in this big or is the second dungeon, I think, in the desert area, where it's a really big open space in the middle, and you have like lots of rooms that come off the side of it, and that design of that specific dungeon isn't really repeated in another one, whereas in Link's Awakening it does feel like they are small room, small room, small room, small room, and just going left, right, up, down, and it all kind of blends together. And one of my biggest pet peeves, the thing that annoyed me the most in the original Link's Awakening, was the staircases. The fucking staircases that take you to an underground 2D section.
Yeah, because they don't link on the map. And they've not really remedied that, have they?
No, but what they have done is they've given you the tools to remedy it for yourself.
Got you, yeah.
Now, I wish they had done this on their own. I wish there had been, for example, if you hovered over a staircase on the map, it would like draw a line to the other staircase it went to.
Or it's just like a 1 matched with another 1, or a 2 with
a
or
2, it would flash blue and the other one would flash blue.
Like, red and red. Yeah.
Right, some kind of indication that these staircases are linked to one another. They don't do that, but what they have done is just a universal change, which is to give you markers on your map. So you have hearts, diamonds, spades, all these different icons, circles, squares, that you can plop down wherever you want. So what I did, and was very crucial for the end of the game, especially with fucking dungeons like Eagle's Tower and Turtle Rock, where they're long, they'll take you a couple hours to get through, and they will just test your knowledge of where the fuck anything is. Having, staircases where I can put heart and heart, so those 2 staircases link diamond and diamond, square and square, circle and circle, and like there are 5 different versions of that I had to use in Turtle Rock. That was hugely beneficial, because I was watching a streamer a little bit after I'd finished the game that evening, and she was playing through, and it was at Turtle Rock, and she was like, oh no, I don't know which staircase to go to, and I'm like, this is why I did this the whole game, to make sure as soon as I go down...
That's a good tip. I'll remember that for the next few dungeons.
Yeah, as soon as you go down a staircase, mark the staircase you go down, and then you come up the other side, mark it as well, and you will fucking thank yourself for it, because it is by far the most frustrating thing in that game, and it 100% meant that I spent at least a couple of extra hours in the Game Boy version versus this one. Just that slight minor difference. And it meant that I had my nose in fucking ZeldaDungeon.com for way more time than I needed to, which I had far less reason to do that this time as a result of that. And I think generally as a result of the visual design being a lot more obvious. Now, there are doors in this game that they kind of slam shut on you, and I was like, how the fuck do I get through that? I'd forgotten. In the original game, they slam shut on you, and they don't really have anything indicating what you need to do. You have to throw fucking pot at them to open them. And in this game, they do have like a pot kind of icon that is there, but it's not super obvious. So
I can't remember any of this. Like, and I didn't even play it that long ago.
Yeah, there are doors you open by like throwing pots at, and I think it's interesting. I wonder how well people who will get to this game who have just come off Breath of the Wild, right? First timers into the Zelda series who bought a Switch, play Breath of the Wild, because this game is the diametric opposite. Like, Breath of the Wild is a game in which you solve problems in any way you want. This is a game in which there's one fucking solution, you better figure out what it is, right?
Or get the owl beak to tell you how to do it.
Or get the owl beak, yes.
Weird thing.
Yeah, it is. It's strange. And I think they needed to do that because there is a lot of obscurity in some of the ideas of this game and some of the puzzles that they have.
I mean, the owl beaks are in the original.
Right, they are, of course, and that is helpful there too. But I think here it's easier for some things which aren't necessarily told to you by the owls. There are definitely some puzzles that you have to figure out on your own. And yeah, like it does create scenarios where you have a better sense of what you need to do, but there will still be a thing where you're like, I don't really know what the game wants me to do here. I think the big example of it that's not made clear at all is in the last dungeon, you have platforms that you can move by moving your D-pad. So like you press A to start it moving, and it's got an arrow on it. And it looks like that arrow is just like, it's a straight line. It's just going to go straight. So I started out that dungeon. I was like, I'm just going to press A on it and it's just going to create a path for me. But you can actually control where that moves. So when you press A, if you use the analog stick to move, you can move the path of this plank. And so it creates wherever you want to go. So you can actually go to far more places than you may initially realize when you start doing that. But it also, I think, a lot of the trouble in this game, especially Eagle's Tower is the worst example of this, is the tedium of red and blue switches. Red and blue switches are a fucking nightmare and I can't stand them. They are a means by which you can block the player's progress and say, okay, the solution here is to remember where the switch was, so you can go back previously in the dungeon and hit the switch to turn the blue blocks off and the red blocks on. And Eagle's Tower is awful about this because so much of the dungeon is predicated on you falling down to land on top of a block, so then you can be on top of them and jump over gaps and kind of go around the place. And so often the dungeon wastes your time. It is less about figuring out where you need to go and more about trying to get somewhere, accidentally falling down a hole, being set off your path and having to go all the way back up a staircase to get back to where you were again. And yeah, that dungeon is a literal nightmare, and I fucking can't stand it, and it is still bad. It is still bad to this day.
I kind of liked it the first time I played through it. I mean, I appreciated that it was the hardest, if one of the harder dungeons in Link's Awakening, but
yeah.
I'm interested to see what I think of it this time round, like, because I think, as I said, my tolerance for like puzzles and working out things in 2D Zeldas was a bit better maybe around 2014 than it is now. So I we'll see. But I did enjoy that dungeon first time, I promise.
I mean, like, the whole idea of it is like using the cannonball to hit the pillars, so you break all the pillars. And just getting the cannonball where you need... There is a point in this dungeon where you can just fucking have the cannonball be stuck. It's just stuck and there's no way for you to fix it. And I had to leave the dungeon and re-enter it to reset where the cannonball was. And that's bad game design. I think the problem is because you have to... a lot of the puzzles are predicated around leaving the cannonball or taking the cannonball to a room, throwing it across to an area that Link can't get across to directly, but throwing it across so that in the future you go around 4 other rooms, you come to that room where you threw it to, and it's still there, which is a neat idea, but because you can't reset it when you want to, like, at the very least, they should have allowed a way to just reset the cannonball placement. Just have a hard reset where it goes back to the room where it was. Because that happened to me again. I remember it happening to me in the original. I did the exact same fucking thing again. And it frustrated me to no end. I found it tedious. I found it time wasting. I found it a complete exercise in frustration and not a good dungeon in any sense of the word. I do find there are people who will hold up Eagle's Tower as one of the best dungeons in the Zelda franchise, and I could not disagree more. I think it is a travesty of game design and just a waste of my fucking time.
Would you say it's quite a Mark Brown dungeon?
Yes, I would. I think he likes that dungeon.
Yeah.
And for me, that shows the complete difference in taste between the dungeons you can have in the Zelda franchise and why I am so much more down the line of a Twilight Princess or a Skyward Sword, where it is far more focused on individual rooms where there is a simple puzzle within it, there's not necessarily that easy, but that has a self-contained idea. That isn't. It's less about the grand. The puzzle is less about finding the key to get to this place to go back. It's less about the exploration of the space. It's more about, you know where to move through the space. It's all about the micro challenges that come across your way as you go through the space, right? And yeah, I just prefer the latter rather than the former. But it does have good stuff there, and you know that there is an interesting nature of it. Like, and I think it's easier to swallow that pill of, I got a key, I need to remember where the locked door was, or I need to make sure I have enough keys to get... A lot of this game is like, there's one particular moment in, I think it's Turtle Rock, where there's literally a room where you go around this little kind of square, and there are 4 locks. There are 4 locks. So you basically need to run around the dungeon and find 4 keys, come back to that area with 4 keys. And that is, quote-unquote, the puzzle of the dungeon. It's about exploring the space and finding the tool you need to move forward. But it literally is a physical block that just stops you there until you run around and get lost and find the keys and where they are. And sometimes keys will just appear for random reasons, right? Like, you will kill the number of enemies in the room, which is the same as the original Zelda. Or you will have to push 2 blocks together. And I think a lot of the literacy of Zelda and the literacy of video games that we've accumulated over the years makes it so that we can just solve those puzzles, right? Like, you walk into a room and there are 2 blocks, 2 spaces apart. And what's the solution? You push one in one side, you push one in the other side. Like, that, it's not obvious at all. Like, it's not obvious in any way. And you can push these in any of the 4 cardinal directions, but you have to push them together, and then a key will just drop from the ceiling. And that's the type of puzzle when I think of the person coming from Breath of the Wild to Link's Awakening, where I'm like, how the fuck are they going to figure that out, right? Like, if they don't have the Zelda literacy that we do, where we just know that's a thing you do, it just kind of baffles me to some degree. So there is old school design in there that doesn't hold up and is just, hey, if you know it, you know it. And it's why it frustrates me to no end, where people are like, yeah, you know, the original Zelda's easy, you can just do the blah, blah, blah. And like, no, you grew up with this game, you know it back to front, so it's fine for you. It's not okay for other people. Yeah. So I don't want to excuse it for that.
But I'm glad this game is creating that debate, like, it feels like. You know, there's a lot more people saying, oh, yeah, this is what traditional Zelda feels like, because it's very easy to see the nice art style, and we know how, like, easy it was to get through a game like Link Between Worlds and assume that this game was going to be something similar. But no, like, it is traditional Zelda, and it's very literal in its replication of those dungeons that are at times very difficult to work out where on earth you're meant to go. And like, it is nice that that's a debate that's happening. And
I know it sounds like I'm ragging on this game a lot. What I will say is I had a fucking fantastic time with this game. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed my time. It's a 2D Zelda game. Of course, I'm gonna really love just running through it. I beat it in 2 days. I beat it over the weekend. I just fucking binged my way through it. I did, I think, 5 dungeons on Saturday and then like finished up on Sunday. It was tremendous, like so much fun the whole way through. And there is just a real ease of play to a lot of stuff in Zelda. I think the problem for me is like the steep difficulty curve, similar to Creature in the Well, as we were talking about. Like, dungeons 1 through 6, great, easy, fun time, breezing through, like no problems whatsoever. And then you get to dungeon 7 and it's like, fuck you, how about this? And you're like, great, thank you. But yeah, and like there are similar things in the overworld, but similar to what I said about the dungeons being a bit more distinct with the rooms and you know how they work, and just understanding how to get from A to B, and a little bit more of the visual design helping. There's an example of this in the overworld, which is really good. That is, when you finish, I think, the 3rd dungeon, you get followed by this ghost, and this ghost keeps following you around. The ghost is like, take me to my home and this place. And the home that you need to go to is this random house that is by the bay, like south of the map. And I remember, because of the detail that they've added, I remember previously in my exploration going to this house, walking inside and being like, oh, this is really decrepit and like broken down, and like there is, you know, like the bed is all messed up and there's spider webs, and it feels like it's an old house that has been left abandoned. Whereas in the original, you enter that house and like yeah, it maybe has a few floorboards messed up and things like that, but you're not going to remember that house. It's not going to stick in your memory like it does now. And so what happened was, like, I see this ghost, I'm like, oh, I know exactly where I need to go. I remember exactly where that is. And even if I didn't know exactly where it was on the map is so good this time around. You can see exactly where things are.
It's labeled and everything. Yeah, it's so
you can
good.
even zoom into specific rocks on the ground. Like, it is so detailed. It's one of the best maps that has ever been in a Zelda game. It accurately represents pretty much everything that is, tile for tile.
Yeah. And it's great because like the traditional 2D Zeldas and of the sort of like Link's Awakening and the two Oracle games in particular, the worlds are so small and dense that it was just a matter of time before one of them was remade, and you would be able to do a map like this Link's Awakening remake has done, where it is so detailed and so accurate. It's so easy to use.
Yeah, it's great. And obviously there's also the map marking stuff you can do on the overworld. So I tended to mark things which, like, it's a bombable wall, I'll put a circle there to remind myself, like have your own code almost. And like, I'm going to put a triangle because it's kind of like flippers, so it's an underwater area I can't get to yet. So that was a good way of reminding myself of certain things on the overworld. And I did think to myself I was going to go and 100% it and do all that, but I was like, by the end, I was like, I've kind of just burned my way through this game, and I feel like, I'm done now. Like, I've finished it. But I did find a decent amount of seashells. Like, you don't have to go out of your way to find that stuff. The heart pieces and things are fun to find on the side. I think the northern end of the map, like the Telltale Heights area, is still a bit of a clusterfuck to navigate. It's not super easy.
There's a lot of tunnels that link it all. And yes. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, that stuff's not great. One of my least favorite things about the game is this really minor thing, but like, why do text boxes wait like 2 seconds before you can press A? Like, I kept finding, like, they would show me something and it wouldn't give me the prompt to press A to continue, and I'd have to wait for like this weird amount of time before I could confirm and go past. And also, every time you collect a goddamn Guardian Acorn or a Power Acorn or whatever, it brings up the text.
Yeah,
I'm like, can you I know what this is. I know. You don't need to tell me.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating. Like, there's a Skyward Sword syndrome of rupees every time you power on the game.
But those Guardian Acorns, they're like new, aren't they? The like little power-ups.
I don't think so. I think those were in the original game. I'm pretty sure they were. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but they just weren't. Obviously, it's much more obvious because it's very color. I mean, I played the color version, so they probably did a similar thing in that game. The color dungeon's still there. I did that right before the final dungeon. It's quick, it's easy, it's really not that hard, but it's worth going through because you get one of the tunics, either the power tunic that does double damage or the defense one, which halves damage. I always go defense, always, every time. I don't know why. I want to survive longer. I want to do that. So yeah. I don't know. It's really good. And I think that if you have played Link's Awakening, it is going to be an easier time for you. Like, similar to someone like me who played it a few years ago, who kind of remembers some stuff. There are going to be like little weird obscure things that will just pop up. You'll be like, oh, I remember that dumb thing. Like the room in one of the dungeons where to get the key you have to kill the enemies in the correct order, and there is an owl that tells you the order, but I did it remembering. I got to that room and I'm like, oh right, do I have to do this? I was like, oh, do I have to kill the rabbit first and then the Reaper guy and then the other guy? And I was like, no, okay, I'll just try it. I'll try it like 3 different ways, and eventually I got it. So it does time save in that sense. And I think the thing that we've not even mentioned, which is, it's like, why would you mention it in 2019 when you have video game controllers that don't have 2 buttons? But the ability to just not go into your menu every 2 seconds is great. It really is. I remember playing the first like 3 hours and being like, I've opened the menu twice. This feels good. I can use my sword and my shield. I can also use the Pegasus boots. I can lift up rocks whenever I want just by pressing A on them. What a joy. I'm glad that they did that.
Like, when you think back, it's kind of mind-boggling that the Game Boy didn't have 4 face buttons. Because the Super Nintendo did, and then they went backwards. It's like, wow. Anyway, because I don't know, it could have. Maybe it's to do with the processing of like the Game Boy, who knows? But
but man, is it a game changer? Like, to some degree, my Y button was just jump the whole game. I basically had a dedicated jump button because I just kept the Roc's Feather there the whole time, and then I'd usually switch out my other thing when and if it was needed. So yeah, that's great. Like it in so many ways, this is the realization of what Link's Awakening should have been in its initial release. I can't excuse the archaic game design because it's there and there's a lot of it. Like think back to the fucking dead chicken under the statue part of the game, wherein you need to go to a section of the map, do a mini puzzle that unlocks a staircase that takes you to Wart. Before this, get the ocarina by going to the dream room in Marbe Village, the dream house where you fall asleep, unlock the ocarina, go to Wart. Wart will teach you a song, take that song to underneath the fucking statue in the village where there's a dead cuckoo, and the cuckoo will let you get across to areas. Like, what a fucking crazy clusterfuck of just nonsense. But, you know, that's the way they made video games back then, I guess. It was just a string of events that you had to figure out, and wasn't made super clear. There is that guy who you can call on telephone every now and again, but he usually is a fat lot of help. He doesn't really do that much. So
that kind of useful.
He'll like hint you in a direction.
It seems more useful than it was before. I don't know whether they've changed it, but
and I like the character stuff. I think it's one of those things that people are like, oh yeah, Link's Awakening it's great story, like really good characters. I'm like, dude, these NPCs have like 3 lines each. Like, I don't understand this idea that this is this deep story in Zelda. It's like the NPCs say like 3 things. Like, they're not fleshed out characters. They really are cardboard cutouts. It just still baffles me that people are like, oh yes, the story of Link's Awakening. It's like, what? Like, yeah, there's a narrative, but it's not. There's nothing.
Nostalgia at the time. I'm sure it was.
No,
cool.
But like people today are still saying that. They're like, oh yeah, I really got affected by the story of Link's Awakening.
No, I'm saying like nostalgia dictates people's views on games today. Like,
I mean, to some degree, right? But like even now, like I was like, oh, Ocarina of Time's a great story in video games. You go back to it now, and it's like it's a fairy tale. Like it's not anything. Yeah, it doesn't really compare to what you have these days. So it's just, I just find it very weird that people talk of it in that reverent way. I will say that like one of the weird things about this game is like the bosses talk to you. You know, like you kill them and you fight them, and they're like, "You will rue the day you did this. You're gonna destroy everything," and it's very weird. One of the weird bosses in the game is the face on the ground. Remember, you have to just.
I know. I remember like thinking back before, because I've not met that boss yet. Like, how do I attack the ground, and like how do I do this? I think you just bomb it and then you slash, right?
And that is the other old school thing about this game, is it doesn't follow the Zelda tradition of you get the item in the dungeon, you use it in the dungeon. Because guess what the item of Eagle's Tower is? It's the fucking mirror shield. You don't use that shit at all in the dungeon. You don't use it once. It's literally a tool for you to get to Turtle Rock, because there's a stream of fire that blocks you. Things. Yeah, well, I know them because I literally just played it. But there's like a stream of fire that blocks you from getting to Turtle Rock, so you have to use the mirror shield to push your way through. So, yeah, it's a weird mishmash, right? And I think ultimately I come down the side of like, I fucking loved it. It's one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had playing games this year. But I can also equally say it was annoying and frustrating as fuck. You know, it has that duality to it. And I would say to people, you know, hey, if you get annoyed with Eagle's Tower, just fucking go to Zelda Dungeon and look up a guide. It's not worth the stress.
I've not
really
even talked about like Dampé's, you know,
moving
around. I've not even touched it yet, and I don't have much desire to be honest.
Don't bother. It's pointless. It's a waste of fucking time. It's bad. I did it.
One of Miyamoto's less good ideas.
Yeah, is it even a Miyamoto idea? Who knows?
Supposedly, it was something he had asked for in the game, because in relation to like the success of Mario Maker, it's we need to test out Dungeon Maker in this. Yes, that was sort of the idea. But
I mean, you know, if you want to go along with the Kyle Bossman train of thought that Miyamoto, everything since like Mario 64, Miyamoto's ideas have been bad, which is a take.
I mean, I wouldn't rule that out, to be honest.
No,
I can see that. It is interesting because 2D Zelda is now in a really weird place where like it's almost a bit like 2D Mario in a way. Like, what is the future of 2D Mario and 2D Zelda, where we know exactly where the 3D versions of those series are, but the next step in 2D is kind of unknown and weird.
It's funny when we talk about 2D Zelda because we talked about Minish Cap, and when you step back, like that is the last truly original 2D Zelda,
and it's a very good one.
Yeah, I mean, like Link Between Worlds is original; it's an original game, but it's the same map, it's the same world, right? We haven't had a truly new space to explore since Minish Cap, which is a little baffling. But you know, we're now in this world where 2D games and 3D games can coexist on the Switch, and we debated about this a lot before the Switch came out about what they're going to do. Are they going to have different pricing? Nope. Turns out Zelda is Zelda. It will charge you full price for a game, despite the fact that if this came out on the 3DS, it would be significantly cheaper. It's Nintendo have realized their franchises, they have value. They can do what they want.
This is a very good example of what happens to handheld games now that it's on the Switch. Like, they're on here too, like it's the same system for Breath of the Wild as well as a Link's Awakening remake. Like, we now know that is the case, and that was one query I think we kind of had before the Switch came, was like, how are they going to handle the big 3D experiences with the 2D ones? I was listening to someone talk about like the value of games and like this, that, and the other, and they made an interesting point that like with a huge budget game like The Last of Us 2 coming out like February next year, that in reality, if you charged in line with the development cost, The Last of Us 2 should cost like 90 quid. Like, there is actually an upper limit that we are well below on some of the much bigger budget games. I think you could throw Breath of the Wild into that category, for example.
Right.
Like, in reality, it would be a lot more than the 50 quid it costs or whatever.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It is weird. And we're in this space where, like, why does, I don't know, there are, like, why does River City Girls, like this 2D brawler, come out and cost $26.99, and then Hollow Knight, this game which it's crazy more ambitious and way longer and bigger and in scope, is 10 quid. Like, it's so strange. Like, you have something like I don't know how you say it, the Somnium Files, which just came out from the people who did 999 and Virtual Last Reward and stuff. That's $53.99. Like, it's a really weird price in the eShop. More expensive than a first-party Nintendo game, but it's this like very niche Japanese game that clearly had a budget that was far less than. And he's like, it's weird. Like, I think it's to some degree like I think it's NIS who publishes that. Maybe it's Atlas, but there is tax associated with those when it comes over. They put their prices high because they have a very niche fan base who they know will pay out the nose for them, which is a little bad. But I was just like, why the fuck does this cost this much? And then you have situations where like you can pay $1 for Game Pass and play Gears 5 like I've been doing, or you could go to Game and pay $57.99. What in what world? In what fucking universe would anyone do that? But grandmothers exist, and grandmothers will buy Gears 5 for $57.99 for their grandkids. So yeah, it's a weird place. It's hard to discuss value because value means different things to different people.
I mean, in an ideal world, obviously Microsoft would charge far more for Game Pass. Like, this is a huge attempt to keep up market share. And
right? Yeah.
If they, in the long term, they want you to go back to a video game outlet and pay the 50-60 quid for a game like Gears 5, and
I don't know if they do. I don't think they do, because
they do in the sense that they don't want to fall out with a game outlet just because their market share is currently so low, in the sense that like they'll need to keep up appearances. That's kind of like why it's still that price, is what I mean, I don't
know. You look at currently Sony have just announced that they're going to be selling everything directly through their website now, so you can buy PS4s and games and everything directly from Sony if you want to, which seems like a step in the direction of cutting out a lot of competition, be it Amazon online or be it GameStop or Game or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, Link's Awakening is good. It's really fucking good. Another thing. Best grass cutting in a Zelda. The grass cutting feels fantastic. Holy shit. Also, going back to Link to the Past reminded me, I hate how short your sword in Link to the Past is. It feels like the little nub. It feels like Link's just fucking swinging out this tiny little nubby thing in front of him, and you can't hit anything, and the hitboxes are terrible, and like you try and slash grass, and you can barely even, like, it fucking doesn't hit it in the arc of the swing. The arc of the swing is. We talk about good game feel in Zelda. a good arc of the swing in 2D Zelda. Let me tell you, the arc of the swing in Link's Awakening, top fucking tier. Real good. Other little similarity or difference, I should say, I noticed. Really long wind-up for the Pegasus boots in Link's Awakening. I wish it was a faster wind-up, because he just, takes a bit of time to wind up and then he goes. Whereas in Link to the Past, he just kind of almost instantly Pegasus shoots off. Anyway, that's Zelda minutia for you, but it matters to me, man. Matters. All the little things that make a difference. Cool. Well, we fucking spent a lot of time talking about that. We're going to take
Zelda
a break.
Game. It's a big deal. Well,
it is, yeah.
But,
it's a new old Zelda game.
A new old Zelda game.
So yes, we'll take a break. We will be back afterwards, though, to answer some of your emails. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Alright folks, welcome back. Little change of plan. We are doing one segment that kind of roll in some emails in with our mobile chat, I guess, because we talked too much about Link's Awakening and went over, but that's fine. There's a lot to discuss, and I think we're gonna talk a bit more next time with some of your emails for Wave Race, because we didn't mention that at all as well, that we had planned to do Wave Race 64 for our backlog club, and then we realized that I was going to be away from my Wii U. Bally's been very busy this week. We hadn't had time to check in enough with Wave Race 64 to discuss it fully, so that's going to be next time. So you've still got 2 weeks to play Wave Race 64, and then we'll do our backlog club on it. So get going on that, and do send your emails in to our email address, which Bally will tell you right now.
Please send them to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We need them.
Absolutely. So yeah, give us your thoughts. You can also obviously head over to our Discord, which the link is in the description for the podcast, and drop some thoughts over there, and then we will bring them into our discussion when we talk about it next time. But let's kick things off with a discussion that will kind of lead us around some mobile talk, but then get into something else. But then we'll go into some mobile talk. We have this email from Matt. Do you want to read this one from Matt, Bally?
So Matt L from the internet says, "Hey MBZ and Bally, Mario Kart Tour just came out today and I promptly downloaded it, having been excited at the prospect of mobile Mario Kart for a while. After waiting nearly 2 hours for the servers to sort themselves out, I managed to get in, go through the tutorial and play a few races, and I find myself exceptionally disappointed. The racing feels extremely dull and the controls are not fit for purpose, especially when you set the drifting controls on, as every tiny turn throws your car into a wide drift, making it nearly impossible to just line yourself up on the track. Overall, it just doesn't feel like a Nintendo game, and I'm amazed they let it get this far. I don't feel any desire to open the app and play again, and for me it's the worst of their mobile outings by far. Mario Kart on mobile seemed like such an open goal for Nintendo, which leads me on to my question. What games have you played that seemed like they should have been fantastic but just ended up as missed opportunities? For me, I'd include Star Fox Zero, Horizon Zero Dawn, controversial I'm sure, and the entire Wii U console. Keep up the good work. Love the podcast, Matt." Well, those last two that Matt said. Star Fox Zero and Horizon Zero Dawn.
All three of these for you, Bally, in fact, you would take issue with, I think.
They are, fantastic games. Flawless.
I'm with you, Matt. Horizon Zero Dawn is overrated as hell. That game is nowhere near as good as it should be. Maybe quickly, I'll just talk a bit about Mario Kart because I didn't talk about it in what we've been playing, but I did play some Mario Kart Tour, and it was about 20 minutes, after which I realized this is a fucking garbage waste of my time. It's weird. It's a real weird thing. It feels very predatory in terms of its monetization. Do you see the thing going around about the Gold Pass, which costs $5 a month?
And that's to get like 200 cc's, right?
Yeah, and also just like some other garbage, and like you put that proposition next to something like Apple Arcade.
I know, and they launch at the same time.
Yeah, also I didn't talk about, I messed a little bit with Apple Arcade on my mum's phone. She has an iPhone, and I figured out that her iPad and also my sister's iPad are both too old to install iOS 13, so there's no way for me to actually play Apple Arcade on a big enough screen. So I played like 40 minutes of What the Golf, which is a game I've been looking forward to for a long time on the screen, but it's really tiny and not good. I don't like playing things on a small screen like that, but it felt really good and played well. Anyway, that's to say that Apple Arcade provides a value that is just remarkably way more. Even Nintendo Switch Online is just way cheaper than this garbage for Mario Kart Tour. It's just depressing how they've monetized it. But I think that is just speaking to how Nintendo have figured the mobile market has gone for them, and we'll talk a bit more about it. But in terms of the game itself, when you steer, you get the option. You get one option which is to just do normal steering, and one option is to do drift steering. I started with drift steering because I'm like, yeah, sure, I want to drift around corners. I want to do that.
You know Mario Kart.
I know Mario Kart.
You've been there before.
And I honestly felt like a 5-year-old trying to play Mario Kart for the first time because it just didn't work. I tried to like move left or right, and it felt like I was going the opposite direction each time. Like, it wasn't steering so much as constantly grinding. Like, you can't not be drifting. So it was trying to get around a course. Imagine getting around a Mario Kart course, but you couldn't accelerate or turn. You'd just be able to drift. That was all you were able to do. It was a living nightmare. So I changed it, and I turned on motion controls, and I changed it to just regular steering. So I like tried the motion controls, like, this doesn't feel good either. And the problem is like when you're steering regularly, there's just this white arrow that's in front of you, this kind of like semi-translucent arrow. And the whole time I'm just like trying to nudge it across and like, oh no, I went too far. Oh, I didn't go far enough. And it doesn't feel precise or tactile or good in any way. It is maybe the worst feeling Nintendo product I have, from a gameplay, game feel standpoint, I've ever come across. It is exceptionally bad in a way that I don't understand how this was allowed to happen.
Did they develop it in-house? Like, what happened?
Yeah, Nintendo have a mobile R&D team that they...
Why didn't they just whap your favourite Mario Kart 7 engine in there and go with that?
No,
you know?
well, like, but they've never done touch controls in a Mario Kart game. They've never done stuff like this before. And the courses are specifically designed to be for the vertical platform for specific... Like, there are old courses in there, but they have been adapted to some degree. And it's not a good experience in any way. It sucks. And it's a shame. But I think we'll kind of get deeper into that when we talk about their mobile efforts generally and like the road they've gone down to get to this point in time. But let's maybe answer Matt's question that he asked, which is, what games out there that you have come across that you're like, this is going to be great, and then you felt like it didn't quite live up, or it should have been better than it ended up being?
I've got a few, and a lot of these are very much personal preference because some of these games do have good critical acclaim as a general rule. But Xenoblade Chronicles X was a game that...
It's a sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles, for God's sake.
Right, and I really enjoyed Xenoblade Chronicles as much as I struggled with that final boss. And Xenoblade Chronicles is a very different game in a lot of aspects, actually, and
it is, yeah.
There were just so many systems and mechanisms, and like as much as there were with the first Xenoblade, I kind of got my head around enough of them to beat that game. Whereas this,
but you watch a trailer for that game, and it's like vast landscapes and just a mech flying through them, and just gorgeous, and like. A lot of the game is that. A lot of the game is running around and doing that stuff. But in order to get to the point where you can fly a mech around that world, boy, do you have to jump through a lot of bullshit.
It's a lot. And I sunk a good 20 to 30 hours into this game, actually. Did the first few story missions or whatever, leveled up, did a bit of grinding. I was kind of getting some aspects, but then it just reached a point where I was like, whoa, what am I doing here? Am I having fun? Is this what I wanted from this experience? And in aspects, yes, like the world is fantastic. I support your view on that entirely, MZ, and like it's an incredible world. But then I was like, but am I enjoying the mechanics of what this JRPG is trying to do? And I was like, I'm just not. I need to put this down before I go down a deep hole, like trying to enjoy this game more than I am. So Xenoblade Chronicles X for sure. WarioWare Smooth Moves on the Wii.
Yeah, man.
We both just absolutely fell in love with Touched on DS at that DS launch, and Touched is a fantastic game. WarioWare Smooth Moves is a good game, but it just felt so lacking in comparison in terms of amount of content, even for the time when we were doing all sorts of fun stuff with the Wiimote, whether it was Twilight Princess or Wii Sports or Wii Play or these other uses of the Wiimote at the time, there was something about WarioWare Smooth Moves that it didn't fall in line with all that other fun we were having with the Wiimote at the time, and it kind of sold itself that it would, and it just didn't live up to that for some reason. And it's quite hard.
It was very gimmicky, right? It was all about yoga poses almost, and let's balance this one on your head and then have this one coming out your nose, and it was weird.
Yeah, and maybe there weren't enough games. The games that were there were overly gimmicky, like you suggested. For me, and you're going to hate me for saying this, Skyward Sword, there were aspects that I just felt where is this world? Why is there only one town to visit? Why it's a very cut off world in a sense, and that's one aspect. But also the sword play, as early on as I was great with it early on, I just kind of got bogged down with it later on, and some of the much more challenging bosses I just was finding the Wii Motion Plus quite unresponsive, especially on those harder bosses. And yeah, overall, I still really love that game. I think it's a fantastic story, and I did beat that game. It's not like it was too much for me, but it was just, there are aspects of it on the back of a game like Twilight Princess that I was very, very into at the time. Skyward Sword just had a few flaws, which for me, when it's a 3D Zelda, just a few flaws in a 3D Zelda is enough to make you think, whoa, this isn't living up to expectation. As much as I think Skyward Sword is a fantastic game.
Yeah, I get that. I definitely understand where people come from with their annoyances and frustration with Skyward Sword. Things down to the Imprisoned, which you have to fight 3 times, and isn't a particularly fun fight. The overworld exploration isn't there's no interlinking between those areas. You have to just go down to them in sections. I get that. But that's the game that they wanted to make, right? And it is it's all built around. It's mainly built around the idea of motion controls, which for me actually is some of the best combat the series has ever seen. It's in some ways it's more interesting than Breath of the Wild. I think Breath of the Wild combat from a base level, if we're just talking about sword to sword, is not that great. It's fine. The interesting part of Breath of the Wild is the nonsense you can do with all the physics systems in that game, like dropping rocks on things' heads and the interactivity of it. But from a pure swordplay perspective, I do think Skyward Sword is actually superior for me personally.
And then finally, Yoshi's Woolly World was just a bit flat in the end. And I don't know what I was wanting from it, perhaps. Maybe I was expecting too much. But there was something about my first playthrough of Yoshi's Island that I just loved. And then I thought this would be up there or thereabouts. It just wasn't. And it was just very uninspiring level design for me, as colorful as it was. And I think the visuals, the woolen style is great.
I think it's very bogged down with collectibles level design.
Collectibles, and there's not much challenge, and I don't know.
There is challenge if you collect all the shit.
If you collect all the stuff, but I was
get to
not
those fucking
up
harder
for
levels to unlock
stuff.
the GameCube skin and things like that.
It just fell a bit flat, really. Those are all very much personal preferences, but those were 4 games I was excited for, and then when I was playing them, there were aspects, some larger than others, that were just lacking for me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That definitely falls in line. For me, there are a few that I feel they could have been so much better had they done certain things, but they missed the mark. A prime one for me is Dragon Quest VIII on 3DS, which is a game that is pretty similar to its PS2 version. It didn't change a huge amount. Like, there's some stuff with... They added like a photo mode thing where you could go around the world and take photos of these areas to get bonuses. But by and large, it's pretty much the same game as that PS2 game. And a lot of people love that PS2 game. But for me, aside from, like, they changed the obvious thing, which is... Modern Dragon Quest games do this now. There's no random encounters. It's just enemies on the overworld, so they did change that. But it didn't have 3D, so it inherently looked worse to me visually. It, on a difficulty scale, was not as well tuned as something like Dragon Quest VII. Dragon Quest VII, a game from the PS1 era that looked really bad, has needed a remake really badly. They remade it, and the remake of 7 is just tremendous. I think it's one of the best games on 3DS. Whereas 8 just didn't change enough. It didn't make itself more fluid in its gameplay. It was still slow to go through the battles. It did add a speed up thing, which did help, but I felt that the challenge of it was a little overbearing, and it got incredibly grindy. The end of the game is just frustrating in how much grinding you need to do to get there. It just wasn't a well done remake. And when I'm thinking about remake, I'm thinking about something like Link's Awakening, which is just doing a lot of quality of life updates, and they just weren't there for Dragon Quest VIII. So I think I just don't like it as much as a lot of people, because I just didn't think the 3DS version was a great version of that. And I think that Square Enix do this a lot. Like, they do this constantly with their old games, and they put out bad versions of them. Look at the 3 Dragon Quest games that have come out on the Switch. They're the mobile games that look like fucking garbage. They just look like trash. They're disgusting. Look at the trailer for those games and you want to vomit in a fucking bin. It's just awful. Awful. So just I can't deal with how terrible the pixel art is. It makes me want to just run around and just never touch those. Chrono Trigger on PC was another one that Square Enix did, where it's just like, what a fucking mess that is. But yeah, Square Enix are the kings of fucking up their old video games. No one does it better than them. They truly have a
Final Fantasy remake coming, 7.
Oh boy, that's like the one standout that's like, hey, they might be doing a good job here. But aside from that,
I'm skeptical something's going to be bad with that they're going to screw up at last minute. I don't know. We'll see.
I bundle these two together, but Smash Ultimate and Mario Maker 2 are both examples of open fucking goals that they, for some reason, kicked out the arena, you know? If we lived in a world where Smash Ultimate, all they did was just put all the Smash trophies from Wii U in there and didn't even add any, I would be more happy with that game. Yeah. You know? It's so easy to just be... I say, okay... I shouldn't say this because development is hard.
Game development is not easy.
Even nothing is easy. It's not to say they're lazy or anything. But come on, man. Come on. Just put all the trophies from the Wii U game in Smash Ultimate at the very least. At the very least, add a rudimentary break the targets. I know they've now added home run contest, which is great. I've played a bit of
One
that.
step at a time.
But, God, Smash Ultimate and Mario Maker 2 both, like, frustrating in various ways that they shouldn't have been. They are follow-ups to games that are just easily put on the Switch from the Wii U and were fumbled in some significant ways. Any Mario Party that was released in a post-GameCube world, i.e. in a world where the internet fucking exists. Like, Nintendo, could you just maybe make a Mario Party game you can play over the internet? It is the most open goal I've seen in my life. Yeah. And yet they don't. They put out one on Switch. Can you play it online? No, you can't. You can maybe play some stupid random modes, but not the Mario Party, not the actual party with Mario and his friends. I hate it. And then the one that is probably more similar to the games you picked, Metroid Other M. a game that had killer trailers, just the greatest trailers of all time. I was so fucking excited for. Looked awesome, like this great action take on Metroid. And boy, that fumbled it in a lot of ways. I think for me, the actual biggest sin that Other M commits is its control scheme. The Wii Remote on its side, holding it upright to recharge your missile / heal yourself. Just
isn't that weird?
Agonizingly bad. Agonizing. Like, and the gimmick is, I like the idea of the gimmick, which is you hold it sideways and you're in 3D mode, and you hold it point at the screen and you go into first person. Like, I like the gimmick idea of that. In practice, it doesn't fucking work. Like, imagine a world where Other M was just nunchuck and Wii Remote controls, or even, you know, just stick a classic controller into the Wii Remote and use that, you know, like that could have been a thing. Yeah, that's the biggest one of like, hey, I was so excited for this game, it ended up being trash. Other M is pretty high
because it was after two like pretty great Prime games as well.
Yeah,
like it was kind of coming. It was at a weird time where it was like, whoa, it's going third person. Here we go.
Totally, yeah. Team Ninja changing it up.
Weird.
Nope, didn't work. So yeah, those are a few examples. I'd say I'd agree with Matt and Horizon Zero Dawn.
Sure.
Game feels bad to play. But the ultimate problem is like shooting a bow feels bad, and you don't want to have that in a game where shooting a bow is like 50% of the game. I'd
say there are games where shooting a bow feels better, but for me it doesn't feel bad.
It feels so bad. Like,
feels fine.
It's just, I don't know. Hey, okay. Well, in that case, let's maybe move then to talk about Nintendo and mobile, and how they've been doing, and what's been going on recently, and what the track is being laid for now. So they, at this point in time, have released 6 games. Is it? It's something like that. And I think maybe let's start with a discussion of Nintendo's pre-mobile era, like what before mobile was happening, what people thought they should do, how they were kind of figuring out monetization. And I want to talk about the 3DS for a sec, because the 3DS was a point in time when Nintendo were experimental with their monetization methods, right? You had, for the first time, a lot of digital downloads with a lot of kind of indie games on there. You had some free-to-play experiments like Steel Diver Subwars, right? Which was a game that you could download for free, but then you could pay to play the online, was it? Or you could pay to play the single player? It
was pay to get the upgraded submarine, so you could go in with your bog standard vanilla submarine and play online, which I did for a little bit and enjoyed it. And but then I never paid to get the, you know me, I like my vanilla. I don't need to pay for the pay for the premium submarines. So yeah, free to start.
You had free to start, right? Which was a term they started using back then, which is like, no, we're Nintendo. We're Breath of the Wild's not open world, it's open air. This is our own verbiage. We come up with our own words. And so you had that. Then you had an example like Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, which was fascinating in that you could, in-game, have an argument / conversation with Rusty in order to like, it's basically like bartering, like real life, you know, when you go to a market, when you're, you know, in some country, and you know, you can go to a market and you can just hassle with the guy and be like, hey, I'll just take it down, like, you know, barter around. And you could do that with this video game to get the prices, the real money price that you would pay for these games down. Which is still one of my favorite ideas that Nintendo's come up with, as ridiculous as it is. It was an experiment. And then they started getting into mobile gaming. And this is where they had to take their ideas from some of the experiments they'd had on 3DS and think about how they were going to implement it into the mobile market. And we began with Miitomo in 2016, which Miitomo was like, what even was Miitomo, right? Like, I think back on Miitomo and I'm like, I don't understand what this was meant for. It was in an era when the Miiverse existed, right? So it had some adjacency to that, but it also had adjacency to something like Tomodachi Life, which was a similar concept in the sense that you had Miis that could talk and that had these weird voices.
But that was about it, really, wasn't it? It was just like...
Yeah, Miitomo was ask questions to your friends and get answers to those questions, or like it would ask you questions to answer and then you could see what your friends had answered as well. And then it had a photo mode where it was kind of leaning on some of the AR features from 3DS, where you'd have like characters running around in the real world and you could put them on top of things and take dumb pictures. You get them to say stuff.
It's not exactly what everyone predicted Nintendo's first outing into mobile was going to be.
Right, because it wasn't really a video game. It was more like an app. It was like a pseudo-social platform, but not. And had so many flaws, but was also this weird experimental thing that we don't see that much these days with Nintendo. Like, post-Switch, it is a much more buttoned up, much more straight-laced Nintendo that doesn't go wacky and weird, and unless, you know, they have these weird experimental things like Labo and now Ring Fit Adventure. But Miitomo squarely fit into that idea of strange Nintendo trying to figure things out. And the monetization was just like not necessary in any way. It wasn't worth it. There wasn't anything to spend. Like, they had remember the weird like kind of claw machine type stuff they did, or like pachinko style stuff that you could play. It was...
Well, that was on... Do you mean on 3DS or in Miitomo?
No, in Miitomo. Miitomo. They had like weird pachinko minigame.
I was thinking about like Badge Arcade with that grab stuff.
Right, that's another example. Yeah. Badge Arcade. What a good example I completely forgot about.
That was a very good example. I didn't spend a penny, got a bunch of badges, really checked in with it every day. Loved it, and would absolutely love for something like that to come to Switch, and might even think about investing a bit of money in some of that stuff, just because, you know, the idea of putting these badges to personalize your Switch, I want to say desktop, but like the, you know, the UI or whatever,
right,
it'd make it, I don't know, the fact we're still in 2019 and we still have themes as black and white is really strange for a company like Nintendo.
Absolutely.
Bit of a tangent, I appreciate that, but
No, that's a good one to pick up.
Needs said.
Because I was trying to think, like, what other weird experiments did they do on 3DS with free-to-play stuff? And Badge Arcade wasn't really a game, but it was a method by which they were trying to do some microtransaction-y stuff by getting you to, like, hey, buy more dips of the claw machine.
It's very much gambling. Like, oh, I didn't get this time. Yeah. Pump that money in, and right. You know, and there will have been some people who have probably gone big on that, which is a little concerning, but that always happens with these things.
Yeah. And then we had Super Mario Run, and I think this was the point in time where I was like, okay, I'm kind of giving up on my grand idea that Nintendo is going to innovate the mobile game space in some way, right? Because I think before they had attempted a mobile game, I was like, well, you know, Nintendo, they're smart. You know, they're game designers. They'll think of a way to leverage the platform, make games designed around it that do something we've never seen before, something brand new. And their first game is something that you've seen a million times before, which is a runner on mobile. And you tap to jump. And I'll give it to you, Mario Run is a polished game. It runs well, it looks really nice, and it definitely has thought put into its level design and stuff like that. But it's ultimately a single-player Mario game that you have about 20 minutes of it for free, and then you just pay for the game. It is basically just downloading a demo. I would say the version of Mario Run that 10 million people downloaded was a demo of Mario Run. And then they were like, hey, now pay us for the rest of it. And people, I think the problem was that because of the mobile market, demos don't exist. That's not a thing there, right? And so you couldn't have an idea of download the demo and then pay for the game. And $10 on an iPhone or an Android phone for your regular Joe is extortion. It's ridiculous. That I looked at $10 for Mario Run. And look, I pay money for video games all the time. I pay a lot of money. Even I was like, $10 for a mobile game? Fuck no, I'm not paying that. Like, that's not worth my money. It's because I think my perspective on mobile games, and I think we have a similar perspective, is like, they're garbage. They're just fucking time-wasting garbage. They're not actual game design. They're just there to pick at your brain when you want to tap a thing, right? And I think that Apple Arcade is starting to change that idea, but what I will say is that Apple Arcade is just putting indie games on phones. That's all that it's doing.
Right.
It's putting real video games on a phone. And you can play them with a controller if you want to, but like, I'd rather play those real video games on a real video game system, you know?
Exactly, but I mean, I fully support what Apple Arcade are doing. A few podcasts have talked about this, but it's fundamentally changing the monetization of gaming mobile, and I think that is so fundamental in a world of Clash of Clans, clickbait, you know, just trying to click through things, and that gotcha culture. It's just like, it has been spiraling out of control, and for Apple to take a step back and say, you know what, why don't we make a paid subscription? And, you know, you don't have to get a new system. This works on iOS devices, and you can play some really great indie games. And it's just such a refreshing thing for us, especially, who are big fans of like critically acclaimed games that, you know,
right.
I don't know how else you would describe our hobby specifically. But
there's so many things on Apple Arcade that are in the sphere of stuff that we would play. Things like The Golf and Sayonara Wild Hearts. And
you could imagine popping up on Switch the next week, you know.
Right, there's a Shantae game on there. There's a Way Forward game. Like, I think the thing that started to turn the needle on Apple Arcade, because I remember Apple Arcade being announced and people being like, oh, they're going to do this subscription. I was like, who fucking cares? And then I started hearing the names of developers. I'm like, wait a second, these are real developers. Like, not to say that mobile developers aren't real developers, but like, kind of yes. Kind of like, yes, actually, I'm talking about people who make right. I'm talking about people who make actual video games as opposed to gambling machines, right? And so that's why I've kind of turned a corner on Apple Arcade, and I'm like, man, I kind of wish I owned like an iPad Mini or something, and I could hook up a DualShock to it, because from a value proposition, like, what The Golf is going to be like 15 quid on Epic Game Store on Switch, but I could pay $5 a month and pay it. Like, it's similar to Game Pass, and Game Pass has radically changed the way that I treat PC gaming. It's crazy. So the idea that I could do that is great, and to some degree makes me a little, you know, jealous of the fact that I don't own an Apple device at this point in time. So, and I wonder, like, I do wonder, is there a future in which Nintendo partners with Apple to put their next mobile game as an Apple Arcade exclusive? Is that a world that exists, right? I don't know, because Nintendo will obviously want to reach Android people as well.
I mean, based on the fact Miyamoto came on stage to launch Mario Run in 2016, I think that is well within the wheelhouse of possibility. I also think that, and we can get into like sales figures and stuff, but as a whole, I think we can more or less get to the summation that like Nintendo Mobile hasn't been reached anything like its potential in terms of success. And I think that some sort of deal or, you know, crossover with Apple that is promoted through Apple Play, is that the name of it? Apple Play?
Apple Arcade, sorry, is a big deal, and is probably in the pipeline in the near future, if not already. Yeah, I do think that it would not only boost sale for Apple, but I think it would just be a strong message to be like, hey man, real video games, how about them? Because something like Mario Kart and, you know, Pocket Camp and talking about all these games, they're real disappointing. They're not the type of game design.
It's Nintendo shoehorning their game ethos into something they're not comfortable with, and you hope that some sort of Apple Arcade deal allows Nintendo to be who they are, which is
totally
the incredibly innovative, independent-minded, unique developer.
Right, and I think that's the problem, right, is because the platform of mobile necessitates free, which necessitates a way that you have to make money. You can't just put out a free thing and not make any money on it, right? So you have to figure out what is the best way to do this, and ultimately predatory gacha is what works. You take a look at what are the however many mobile games Nintendo put out, what are the two most successful games? They're Fire Emblem Heroes and they're Dragalia Lost. Why? Because they are JRPG gacha fests that you have fan bases who love the characters, who want to get the characters. So they invest $1,000 to get Hector and end up not getting fucking Hector, right? That's why Fire Emblem Heroes...
Was this you in a previous life, MBZ?
Yeah, no, it could be me in another life. Fire Emblem Heroes has made 10 times the amount of revenue that Animal Crossing Pocket Camp has done. And I would argue that Animal Crossing is more recognizable. It's a more successful Nintendo franchise in terms of sales and likability from a general wider audience. And yet Fire Emblem Heroes is vastly more successful because it leans into the deepest, darkest part of mobile gaming, and it does a good job at the gacha stuff. It just nails it. So you get $500 million from that game, where you only get making $50 million from Animal Crossing. And that is ultimately, when Fire Emblem Heroes came out, that was when I resigned myself to like, well, not even Nintendo can save mobile gaming. It is a lost cause. It really is, because I did have some semblance of hope in my heart that Nintendo would find a way to monetize mobile gaming or to innovate in the space that would take us away from timers and take us away from loot boxes and take us away from gacha. And yet, what did it show? It showed that the most successful thing they've done on mobile is just another fucking gacha. Yeah. That's when all hope was lost for me. And, you know, they continue to put out things. Like, they put out Animal Crossing, which I played for 5 minutes, thought was bad. Dragalia Lost, I have had downloaded on my phone for like 2 years and haven't even opened yet because I can't be bothered. I didn't even download Dr. Mario World, but that probably seems like an okay thing, maybe. I don't know. I remember people being pretty sour about it. And I have Mario Kart Tour, which kind of looks the part, but fuck me, the monetization is disgusting and greedy.
I saw a Mario Kart Tour trailer where you got that track based on Paris, a track based on Tokyo, and I was like, wow, they like real world places in a Mario game. This is awesome. And then all these people, I mean, I've not tried it, I should say. I own an iPhone 5C, which is not up to scratch in order to play some of these games. But it's kind of crazy that they are in the position that they're in, and that they pursued the markets that they have, and gone for the gacha, and not, you know, Nintendo put their own slant on everything. They've even put their own slant on VR this year. Who would have thought that was going to happen in 2019? And I mean, I don't know, it's been necessarily that successful, perhaps, but I think from a critical perspective, a lot of people have said, that's kind of cool. Well done, Nintendo.
It is kind of cool.
I don't think people are through sales or not, are critically saying the same thing about their mobile experiences. It's very much kind of, they're not breaking the mold. They're conforming to it, and that is not what Nintendo normally do.
Exactly, 100%. You hit the nail on the head there. Nintendo are not conformists. They are leaders, they are innovators, and they are different. And their mobile efforts are not. They are far from it. They are the most towing the line possible. And that is ultimately the disappointment with Nintendo's strategy in mobile, is that they decided that, hey, Super Mario Run was this experiment. Turns out, doesn't work. People don't care. And despite the 100 million people, or however many people have downloaded it, the conversion rate on that must have been like 0.5% or something. It must have been incredibly low. Because people are not willing to pay for experiences on that platform. And to be quite frank, I don't think generally you really should, in a lot of ways. You know, there are exceptions, of course, right? Like, there are games like the Phoenix Wright trilogy that's on mobile, and like, hey, those are great games and they work perfectly with a touch interface. Go ahead, knock yourself out. But a majority of the platform, as we've kind of discussed, is less than ideal.
And I know it's not Nintendo, and maybe the conversation was going to go this way in any case, but we should talk about like Pokemon Go and
yes.
What does that do? Why was it successful and Nintendo's efforts haven't been? And why
was Pokemon Go successful? Because it innovated, because it was the first, because it did something different, and somehow, and to be fair, it really wasn't, but it was the first thing that was mainstream that people found out about, because the other game that Niantic made before it was the same thing, Ingress. But Ingress wasn't like a mainstream popular hit. Pokemon Go was like, yo, what if we took this idea that matches perfectly with this franchise and do this thing? And off to the races, man. It was.
And then we've seen that Harry Potter thing, which has tried to go along with the Pokemon Go thing, and to my knowledge has completely flopped. Harry Potter isn't, well, it's not bigger or smaller than Pokemon strictly, but I mean, I guess to a video game audience it's definitely smaller, but you would still think Harry Potter is a big enough brand to go big with something like this.
But I think it's just like the match between Pokemon and that idea was so perfect, because it is inherent in the nature of Pokemon that it's all about going out and finding them and exploring and you got to catch them all, like it is very tailor built for that very idea, because the world of Pokemon is a world in which a kid goes on an adventure and finds Pokemon in forests and things like that, and that's, guess what, you can do in real life. You can do that in Pokemon Go. So that I think is why it's such a distinct difference, is because Pokemon Go is something that no one had ever seen before. Mario Run, I've seen 500 Mario runs, like I just have. So ultimately, what do they do now? Like, where do they go from here? They're in a position where, from a critical consensus, people who play actual video games don't really care about what Nintendo is doing. And they have Apple now, who are starting to get people like us to actually care about mobile games, in the sense that Apple Arcade is a good value proposition.
Yeah.
So, like, where do they go with this? You also have the statistic that, like, Mario Kart Tour is being downloaded by some 20 million people, and the majority of reviews on the App Store are incredibly positive. And that's because most people who download Mario Kart are like, I remember that from when I was younger on the Wii, because that's people who exist now.
That's a standard line with Nintendo often. Yes. I remember Nintendo.
Yes, exactly. And so, like, they will just get it and be like, hey, this is fun, I can play Mario Kart, and they won't think the controls are bad because they have no taste and they have no context. They have no context, quite frankly, for what controls should be, and they're used to touchscreen interfaces, and they'll be like, this is great. So ultimately, will they make a lot of money on this one? I think they're probably positioned to, compared to Animal Crossing or Dr. Mario. This probably will likely do maybe better than Fire Emblem Heroes, potentially. We'll have to wait and see, but it from a mass audience perspective, Mario Kart Tour seems to be a pretty roaring success so far.
Interesting, yeah. I mean,
makes me
Mario
sad.
Kart is a huge brand, and I'm interested to see where it goes.
It's enormous. It is maybe their biggest franchise.
Yeah. No,
and Smash Brothers is obviously creeping up on it on Switch in terms of sales, but Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is also a remake of it's not even a remake, it's a fucking port of a game. So and it's still the most successful thing on Switch. So yeah, it's hard to argue with it. It's kind of crazy how Mario Kart...
I mean, Nintendo probably think that they still have so many big guns to go in terms of like their franchises that they'd potentially experiment with in the mobile space, like your Zeldas, for example, and I don't know, not that Metroid is massively mainstream, but Metroid, or like the stuff they can try. That I don't know. Are they thinking, we're going to wrap up mobile in a couple of years, it's not working? Or are they thinking, this is a huge market, we have to keep bashing our head up against a wall until we make something click, because it's too big of a market to avoid, essentially?
I think if nothing else, it's brand awareness, right? It's making sure that you keep the idea of Mario Kart alive in people's minds, and keeping things like Animal Crossing, because Animal Crossing Pocket Camp came out at a point where, like, hey, it's been a long time since the last Animal Crossing, and hey, guess what? Next one's not coming for 3 years, so here's a thing to... It's almost like what they did with the Zelda franchise, where they're like, here's Triforce Heroes, don't forget about Zelda, we're working on the next one, it's coming, just here's another thing in the meantime. It's that idea of just rejuvenating the brand awareness and making sure that people don't forget it exists.
Mario and Zelda in particular, there are always like remakes or iterations or multiplayer experiences or something just coming out that like keeps you aware of Mario and Zelda, and these are brands that we want you to know about.
And they're starting to do that much more widely now because the Mario movie they're making and stuff like that, and obviously when the theme parks get fully finished.
What year is that movie meant to come out?
I don't know. They announced it, last year maybe? Or maybe it was the year before. Miyamoto's involved. It's with the people who made Despicable Me and Minions, whatever they're called. Yeah. Can't remember them. But yeah, that's happening. So ultimately, if nothing else, even if they don't like make the type of money that they think they should be making on mobile, they're still making a fuck ton of money. Like Fire Emblem Heroes, chugging along like no one's business. It's just doing so well. And it at least allows them, as they have said before, like their whole line with mobile gaming for the longest time was, this is a way for us to indoctrinate people to buy a Switch, right? Be like, hey, here's a taste of some Mario. Look at Odyssey. This is this big 3D thing that you can take with you on the go. How about that instead? So, and Mario Run probably has converted some people who went on to buy New Super Mario Brothers U on Switch. I would imagine that's the case. Like it probably has happened to somebody. It's not going to happen to everyone, but it's definitely keeping the franchises in mind, but also trying to proposition them as it's a lesser experience, and how about you go have the proper experience on our actual console?
Yeah.
It's advertising in many ways. These efforts they're doing. So
yeah.
And I don't know what the runway is for the next game, right? Because Mario Kart was the one we've been waiting for ages. I don't remember or recall if they had another one that they'd announced at this point in time.
I'm just looking at this Wikipedia page, and supposedly Pokemon Sleep is 2020, but that's obviously not directly
That's not,
them.
yeah, that's the Pokemon Company, a separate thing.
So I think, Mario Kart Tour seems to be the last announced.
Right. Have they announced they're doing a Zelda game for mobile yet? Has that been announced, or has that just been rumored?
I don't believe so, but it has definitely been rumored a long time.
Yeah. I feel like that's the next one up to bat, isn't it? It is Zelda, and what do they do with Zelda?
Dampé's Zelda Dungeon Maker on mobile, where you just...
Right, yeah.
But, I mean, how could that appeal to a mainstream audience, I don't know.
Exactly.
It's weird. I think that you're most likely to see them stick to their roots and release something more traditional in line with Apple Arcade. I think that is truly that's their comfort zone, as much as all this other gacha stuff is appealing in terms of like making people aware of their brands.
The thing is, right, like how much money does Apple pay Nintendo? Because Nintendo, I think to some degree you could argue that like they have devalued their IP by putting them for free on mobile, right? Like there is an argument to be made that like Mario Kart is lesser because Mario Kart Tour exists, right? Because Nintendo prides themselves on prestige and making quality products, and Mario Kart Tour like just in some senses lessens the brand.
Is there a market that is less inclined to pick up the next Mario Kart on Switch in any sense because Mario Kart Tour exists? Maybe like a tiny one, but still there's no need for that group to exist, like
maybe. But like I think it's much more likely that people play it and are like, hey, Mario Kart, I remember that, and then see the actual one and buy that. That's the far more likely scenario. But I think what I'm saying is, hey, it seems like Apple's doing an okay job compensating developers. They're getting exclusives. They probably seem like what Microsoft's doing with Game Pass is like paying developers, giving them a good amount of money to put them on the service.
I mean, that is the future. Who's got the most money to pay the best developers to make the best games, essentially?
Right, really
who's winning
is.
that game?
But I think that the other worrying thing for a lot of those developers is take something like Sayonara Wild Hearts, which is, by all accounts, a couple of hours long. If Apple are going by a model of paying people depending on how many hours they play of games, it's bad. It's I think about something like The Gardens Between, and like, are they being paid for the amount of time I spent playing that game? Because I spent way more time playing Sunset Overdrive, but like, does that mean Insomniac gets way more money? It's weird. It's like, that shouldn't be the way in which you compensate developers, because there are some remarkable games out there that deserve money that are short. They're just short experiences. Absolutely. By the nature of the beast. And this is the thing, because Google have now come out with their own version of Apple Arcade, which is called like Google Play something or whatever. It's the same thing. It's $5 a month, and they have Stardew Valley on there. They've got Limbo on there. Like, it's kind of crazy. They have like 300 apps.
Will this still be launched? Is this like in line with Stadia, or is it completely different, or there's an overlap?
This is a separate thing to Stadia. This is basically Google just firing back at Apple Arcade and making their own arcade Google thing. And you can get it now. You can pay $5 a month and you can just download Stardew Valley on your phone if you want. It exists. So, I just worry about stuff like that with Google. Like, are they paying these developers enough? Is this a good value proposition? And it's scary for the world of independent games going forward, because if we are moving to a subscription model for so many services in the future, to what degree does that devalue independent games? To what degree can indie survive? And like, how much are these companies paying them? Is it worth it for Ooblets to go to be an Epic Store exclusive because Epic's paying them a bunch of money to secure their studio to survive and keep going after this game comes out, if it's not potentially a success? Like, what if Ooblets comes out and it doesn't sell enough copies, then the studio could go under. So I think it's all about securing stability for those studios, and also giving them what they're worth, and not underpaying them. which seems like that a lot of studios are happy with how Apple Arcade has gone so far, and it seems like Microsoft is doing the same with Game Pass. So as long as that stays okay, should be good. But
yeah.
I
mean, this is definitely a part of a wider discussion of like games are in just this massive time of flux, and the mobile aspect is just one big part of the wider future of traditional video games development, virtual reality, streaming games. Like, these are all factors in just the most. It's hard to compare it to any other like media in terms of how fast it's evolving, in the history of ever, to kind of, when you kind of put it into perspective.
Yeah, video games are 30 years old, really. Like, maybe a bit more, like 40-ish, if you want to push to real old stuff. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how old everything. I say 30, then I was like, wait a second, 30 years is early 90s. So yes, it is like 40, maybe 50 if at a push, which is nothing. It's nascent compared to a lot of other stuff. So yeah, hey, interesting stuff though, man. And Nintendo's mobile efforts, I'll continue to be interested in their business approach. I will continue to be uninterested in playing any of them, I think.
I mean, really, the real, what Nintendo know they're good at is the stuff like Ring Fit, right? That's their real, that's
exactly.
their jam.
Yeah. Boy, I want to buy that thing.
I want to buy that thing as well. JRPGs with Wii Fit, let's do it.
Yeah, man, what the fuck? Oh god! Like,
when they were like really coy about what it would look like, as in like on screen what you're doing. I was really like, why are they so funny about that? Why didn't they announce the ring with what you did on screen? And then now I kind of see why there was that delay, because it was like everyone get excited, and then it's like, JRPGs coming your way. Like, it was just weird.
I certainly didn't expect that to be the case. I was like, this is just gonna be another Wii Fit, some mini games, do some yoga exercises, and it turns out like it kind of is. It's kind of Wii Fit 3, if you want to label it like that. But
is this how you get a mainstream of people into JRPGs through the back door? They go, that was really fun playing Ring Fit. Let's try Paper Mario or something,
Right. I like leveling things up. Oh dear. I'm afraid, Bally, that just leveling systems generally have broken through JRPGs, so I think a lot of people are familiar with that and won't necessarily connect it.
That's Nintendo's real long-term plan. How do we get more people into JRPGs?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get those sales of Xenoblade 2 on the docket. Got to sell more of those.
Xenoblade 2 now compatible with Ring Fit.
You know what? I would get so fucking fit if the next Xenoblade required me.
These games are 80 hours long. Everyone's gonna get super fit.
No, but like, dude, like, think about how much pointless running around you do in Xenoblade. Like, remember when I swam around the whole of Aerith Sea? Imagine me doing that with fucking Ring Fit. Imagine if Ring Fit made me swim around Aerith Sea. That's what I want. Nintendo, here's the thing: Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is coming out. Add Ring Fit support, please. Please do that. I swear to God.
I can't. Something's going to get Ring Fit support, and I hope it's a JRPG. That's all I'm saying.
Oh my God, I would lose my fucking mind if they did that. I might just replay the whole of Xenoblade with a goddamn stupid ring. Oh boy. Oh dear. Okay, good. Well, hey, anyway, that's Nintendo and mobile. I think it was a good time to talk about it because, like, Apple Arcade was happening this time, and I think it's an interesting initiative. It's a interesting kind of new monetization strategy, and the potential there is great. So cool. I think that's going to wrap us up for the show. Remember, next time we are going to be talking about Wave Race 64, which I don't know how much more you've played of it, Bally, but I need to get on that, play some more Wave Race.
4 or 5 hours into that game.
Nice.
I'm kind of stuck on hard mode, but I'm getting there. I'm gonna give it a go. Don't think I'm gonna get past it, but I'll try.
Worth a try. Yep. So send in your emails for that. That is our email address, which Bal will tell you now.
Please send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Absolutely. And yeah, we will talk about it then. You can, of course, support the show in various ways. Patreon is one of those ways to do so, and we'd like to thank some of our patrons for supporting us.
Yes, thank you to all of our patrons, especially our two $10 tier patrons. They are, of course, my fiancée Caroline and Atari Alex. Thank you so much for your $10 tier support, and thanks to all of our other patrons as well.
Absolutely. You can find the show in various places. We are on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify, we're on Alexa. We're on
Alexa.
We're on Alexa. We are on, podcatching apps. Any app you download, Beyond Pod, Pocket Casts, Instacast, all the casts were there. Find us, download us, subscribe to us, iTunes review us. Very important, very helpful, very good. We are in various places on the internet as well. You can find our Twitter account, which gives you updates on all the things that we do, including links to our Discord, our YouTube channel, etc. And you can find that at twitter.com/TNL podcast or at TNL podcast. You can find me at Lord NBZ. That's LORDNBZ. Thought I'd spell it out this time for fun, because that's what Bally does all the time. Bally, where can they find you?
It's because my name's long and complicated.
I know.
I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91.
Fantastic. Very good stuff. Yeah, I feel like that's pretty much it. Have I forgotten anything? Are we good here? I think we're good here.
I think we might be good here. There's just so many video games to play, so my brain is definitely frazzled by them all.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of a wait now for Luigi's Mansion, which is the end of October. So we've got a month or so until that comes.
I might try and beat Ori in that time. Is that bold?
Oh, that's maybe. I don't know.
Am I biting
man.
off too much? I don't know.
I don't know. You know what? I need to download that again.
You need to play that game again.
Yeah, I love it. It's the best. So yeah, it's lots of things. I'm sure a lot of you are playing Dragon Quest. I also...
What about Untitled Goose Game? That came and happened, and people like it. And
there's no time. There's no time to play anything.
I think it might be quite a short game, so it might be a good one to give a go. I don't know.
It's on sale, actually. It's got a launch discount, so I might grab that. I got £5 off the eShop.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be
Let's do that.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, I hope you all enjoy the crazy amount of video games on Switch right now, and the season coming up, and yeah, it'll be good. We'll see you next time, a couple of weeks, for another episode. Until then, thank you everyone for listening. Bye bye. The musical interlude used on today's episode was Telltale Heights from the Link's Awakening remake. Copyright Nintendo 2019.